Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lilie James. Lilie James was born in May 2002 in Yarborough, New South Wales, Australia. She was the beloved first child of the close-knit James family, especially adored by her maternal grandmother, Barbara. Growing up by the ocean with her younger brother Max, Lilie was known for her active and enduring nature, with a passion for swimming. Her father, who coached water polo at an Anglican girls' school, supported her interest. Her friends remembered her as sociable, friendly, and excelling in her studies, always willing to help others, which made her very popular. In her upper school years, Lilie's achievements in academics, sports, and community life were recognized, and she was considered one of the best students. Her incredible talent to excel in all areas of activity was undeniable. She also had a passion for the dramatic arts, which led her to participate in the theatre and dance club. She was eventually invited to perform at the famous Woodford Folk Festival, one of Australia's largest annual events. During the event, Lilie impressed the audience with her rendition of a monologue from William Shakespeare's Macbeth, showcasing her skills, charisma, and allure, and securing second place in the theatre category. In 2018, Lilie passed her beginner's driving test, adding to her list of accomplishments. Her athletic successes were also noteworthy, as she began to pursue water polo professionally, earning the title of swimming champion in the under-17 category. Her parents were thrilled with her successes and celebrated each accomplishment grandly. By her senior year, Lilie had decided to focus on a sports career, and in 2020, she enrolled at Sydney Technological University to pursue a bachelor's degree in sports business management. In 2021, Lilie started a new job as a water polo coach at St Andrew's Cathedral School to gain teaching experience and spice up her college routine. Thanks to her youth, vibrant personality, and love for sports, she quickly connected with her colleagues, the administration, and her students, trying to find a unique approach to each student and highlight their strengths. It was during this time that Lilie met Paul, the new cricket and hockey coach, who caught her attention. Initially, their interaction was friendly and limited to mutual greetings, but it later developed into a romance. Lilie fell in love, unaware of Paul's true nature. He showered her with compliments, gave her flowers, and organized evenings together. They agreed to keep their relationship private due to school policy and Lilie's personal beliefs. However, over time, rumors began to spread, and Lilie discovered that Paul had broken their agreement and portrayed her in a negative light. She felt betrayed and humiliated, so she confronted Paul and ended the relationship. On October 26, 2023, the principal of St Andrew's Cathedral School in central Sydney sent an email to students and parents at 4:30 a.m. announcing that the school would be closed until the end of the week due to a critical incident. 2 hours later, a second notification reassured families that none of the students were involved in the incident. However, graduating students sitting for exams were exempt from the closure. The school provided psychological support to those affected by the situation. A 24/7 consultation center was set up in the school library to provide assistance. On Thursday and Friday, forensic teams thoroughly searched the school building and surrounding area. Access to the gym was restricted, and the adjacent shower area was scheduled for demolition. The reason for the school's closure was slowly revealed. On October 25, 2023, around midnight, the body of 20-year-old Lilie James, the school's water polo coach, was found in the school shower. She had last been seen alive at 7 p.m. Surveillance cameras showed someone following her around 8 p.m., but the pursuer left alone and exited the school. Lilie's parents raised the alarm when she failed to contact them, and the police were informed. A night guard discovered her body in a pool of blood with severe head injuries. After recovering from the shock, he called emergency services. Later, detectives invited a family friend to identify the body, which was difficult due to the severity of the injuries. The news of Lilie's death sparked an outpouring of grief from the community. Her home was filled with friends, neighbors, and acquaintances offering support to her family. Locals also paid their respects, leaving flowers and toys outside her home, creating a memorial. In a shocking twist, another tragic death occurred on October 27, 2023, at 8 a.m., just 11 miles from the scene of Lilie's death. A man's remains were discovered on the rocks of Diamond Bay Reserve, near Vaucluse, an eastern suburb of Sydney. After the police were called, a rescue team was quickly assembled, including a bomb squad, Marine Corps, and a rescue helicopter. At 3:30 p.m., they recovered the man's body and took it to forensic experts for identification. Due to the severity of his injuries from a high fall, visual identification was not possible, so fingerprints were used instead. The experts suspected the man's identity, but they needed confirmation. Eventually, they identified the body as 24-year-old Paul, who was suspected of committing a crime against Lilie James. Investigators now had to piece together the connection between the two fatal incidents and uncover what had happened between them. Paul's later attempts to make amends and apologize were rebuffed by Lilie, who remained unforgiving. She took comfort in the fact that their brief relationship had at least revealed his true nature to her. Born in 1999 in the Netherlands, Paul came from a wealthy and prominent family. When his father's job required a move to Australia in 2015, Paul and his family relocated. As an only child, he received excessive attention and pampering, which contributed to his selfish and entitled personality. Paul thrived academically and athletically at St. Andrew's Cathedral School, where he excelled in cricket and eventually became team captain. He was also involved in organizing extracurricular activities and festivals. While some of his peers found his confidence off-putting, he was charming and charismatic around girls. After graduating in 2017, Paul landed a job as an assistant coach for cricket and hockey. By early 2018, he took over the management of these sports teams. Despite feeling confident in his new role, Paul suddenly resigned and returned home to his family for unknown reasons. Back home, Paul pursued further education, earning a master's degree in sports management. During a conversation with old friends, he revealed that he had honed his coaching skills, which led to a lucrative job offer from his former employer. By early 2020, Paul returned to his old school. Upon his return to Australia, Paul reunited with a former friend, and they decided to split housing costs. Paul preferred shared living, despite being able to afford a solo apartment. Their economically priced apartment was in Kensington, a suburb of Sydney. Initially, the friends got along, socializing at bars after work. However, a few months later, tensions arose, and Paul decided to live alone due to their conflict. The Theson's son, Paul, felt isolated despite being constantly surrounded by people. His parents suspected he had not had a serious romantic relationship. In March 2020, an 18-month lockdown in Australia, Paul was stuck in the country, unable to visit his family due to the risk of infection. The strict quarantine measures affected every aspect of life, forcing Paul to rely on himself. By summer 2021, life had returned to normal. However, it became apparent that the isolation had taken a toll on Paul's relationships. When he resumed his activities, people noticed a change in his character and behavior. Paul bounced back, becoming a key player on the hockey team and maintaining an active lifestyle, even appearing in match advertisements. Paul's behavior became increasingly disturbing. Friends and acquaintances reported seeing him lash out in uncontrollable anger, a side of him they had never witnessed before. Rumors also circulated at school that he had an inappropriate interest in his female students, often flirting with them and making them feel uncomfortable. Despite this, Paul was still highly regarded for his coaching skills, which significantly contributed to the team's success in the Australian Hockey League. However, his personal life began to unravel when his girlfriend Lilie ended their relationship after he was put on trial. The investigation into Paul's involvement in her murder quickly gained momentum. Surveillance cameras inside and outside the area where the body was found played a crucial role in identifying him as the prime suspect. The police also tracked his movements using his cell phone's GPS and contacted his service provider to determine his last known location. The police were also eager to find the victim's phone, hoping it would contain clues about the events leading up to her death. After tracing the locations of the devices, they reconstructed the timeline of events and found that Paul had purchased a hammer at a hardware store a couple of days before the attack. It appeared that Paul was consumed by anger and decided to confront the girl violently. Lilie's innocence in the situation was clear, but the events that unfolded were as follows. On the morning of October 25th, Lilie went to the university and then to her job in the afternoon. Meanwhile, her ex-boyfriend rented a silver Lexus and drove to the school, but he didn't enter the building because he had no classes. Instead, he waited in the car. After the students left the building, the perpetrator walked to the gym, hiding a hammer under his jacket. He waited for Lilie to finish her training, then followed her when she went to freshen up and take a shower. This was when Lilie was most vulnerable, and the perpetrator attacked her, striking her head. According to pathologists, her death was instantaneous, and she did not suffer. An hour later, he gathered Lilie's personal belongings in a backpack and left the building. He got into his car and drove to Diamond Bay, where he disposed of the hammer in a garbage container. Security cameras recorded him at the reserve at 8:47 p.m. Paul's last known location, as tracked by investigators, was The Gap, a cliff in Sydney's eastern suburb of South Head. The Gap is a popular tourist spot, but it's also infamous for its history of suicides. At around 10 p.m., Paul used Lilie's phone to send a message to someone called James, which would ultimately lead to the discovery of the girl's body. It's unclear why Paul did this. Possibly he felt remorseful and wanted to ensure the girl received help. Or maybe he was simply telling her parents where they could find their daughter. He made a brief emergency call an hour after the incident, but hung up. He then went to a cliff and took his own life, which had been a decision he had been considering for a long time. When the police arrived, they found the personal belongings of him and his former lover, as well as a rented car parked nearby. It seemed clear that he was no longer alive, possibly due to his inability to cope with his guilt or face the consequences of his actions. The priority was now to find his body. A search operation began on October 26th at 9 a.m., with police helicopters and boats patrolling the coastline and cordoning off the area around the cliff at Diamond Bay. However, no body was found on the first day. The next day, his body washed up on the rocks of the reserve. After an autopsy, Paul was officially declared responsible for Lilie James's death. Although it was impossible to hold him accountable due to his own death, the criminal case was closed. His parents received his body and decided to cremate him and scatter his ashes in Sydney, rather than returning him to the Netherlands. Lilie's funeral was held on November 17, 2023, at her former school in Hurstville, where around 500 people gathered to bid farewell to a loved one, friend, and coach. The school administration arranged a live broadcast of the ceremony. In line with Lilie's lively and vibrant personality, her family requested that attendees wear bright colors instead of traditional dark attire. The ceremony was filled with heartfelt tributes to Lilie, as speakers shared warm and sincere words about her. The James family expressed gratitude to everyone who had supported them during their difficult time. Outside the building, students and colleagues created a makeshift memorial featuring Lilie's favorite flowers, accompanied by farewell letters as a sign of respect and admiration. After the investigation into Lilie's tragic death was completed, the school management sent a follow-up email to parents, apologizing for the impact of the tragedy and assuring them that the incident was unforeseen and would not happen again. While many were shocked that a place of safety had been breached, the administration encouraged students to view this as an isolated incident and to continue their education with renewed enthusiasm. Renowned forensic psychologist Tim Watson Monroe, an expert in analyzing the minds of both criminals and victims, was consulted about Paul's actions. His analysis revealed that Paul's behavior was characteristic of individuals with inflated self-esteem who cannot accept rejection. According to Monroe, Paul did not act impulsively, but rather deliberately and without remorse. Monroe believed that Paul took his own life to avoid taking responsibility and facing shame for his actions. He described Paul as a narcissistic individual with psychopathic tendencies. Monroe also distinguished Paul's case from the tragic tale of Romeo and Juliet, as their narratives were fundamentally different. Ultimately, Paul's pride and ego clouded his judgment, leading him to make devastating decisions. He failed to appreciate the love and companionship of Lilie, and instead chose deceit and betrayal. In the end, Paul's selfishness resulted in the loss of Lilie's life, as well as enduring suffering for both their families. His actions were a bitter repayment for the care and attention he received from those who loved him. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sylvia Likens. Sylvia Marie Likens was born on January 3, 1949, in Lebanon, Indiana, USA, to carnival workers Lester Likens and his wife Betty Likens, formerly Grimes. She was the third of 5 children, with 2 older twins, Daniel and Diana, and 2 younger twins, Benny and Jenny. Sylvia's youngest sister Jenny had polio, which left her with a significantly weakened leg, causing her to limp noticeably. She had to wear a steel brace on her leg to help her walk. Sylvia's parents had a tumultuous marriage, with constant moving and financial struggles. They worked at carnival booths throughout Indiana during the summer, selling candy, beer, and soft drinks. To help out, the Likens children would often travel with their parents, but Sylvia and Jenny frequently stayed with relatives, mostly their grandmother. This arrangement not only kept the young girls safe, but also allowed them to have a more stable education. From a young age, Sylvia took on various responsibilities, including babysitting, running errands for neighbors and friends, and completing household chores like ironing clothes. In doing so, she earned some money, which she used to buy things for herself and occasionally shared with her mom. Those who knew her described Sylvia as a friendly, confident, and charming girl. She had long, wavy, light brown hair that fell just below her shoulders, and her friends affectionately called her Cookie. Despite her vibrant personality, Sylvia was self-conscious about her smile due to a missing front tooth, which she lost during a childhood accident while playing with one of her brothers. Sylvia loved music, particularly the Beatles, and was very protective of her younger sister Jenny, who was shy and less secure. The sisters frequently visited a local skating rink, where Sylvia would assist Jenny, holding her hand as Jenny relied heavily on her stronger leg. In June 1965, Sylvia and Jenny Likens were living with their parents in Indianapolis. The following month, their mother was arrested and jailed for theft. Shortly thereafter, their father arranged for his younger daughters to stay with Gertrude Benisi, a mother of 2 girls, Paula and Stephanie, whom the Likens sisters had met at Arsenal Technical High School. Gertrude promised their father that she would care for the girls as if they were her own until his return, which was expected to be just after the 4th of July celebrations. The Likens sisters, Sylvia and Jenny, moved into the Benisi home at 3850 East New York Street. Their father, older brothers, and eventually their mother went on the road with a carnival on the East Coast. As part of the arrangement, Gertrude Benisi would receive $20 a week to care for the sisters until their family returned in November. At first, things seemed normal at the household. Sylvia got along well with Stephanie, bonding over their shared love of popular music and helping with household chores. The Likens sisters regularly attended Sunday school with the other Benisi kids, and the pastor often commended Sylvia for her kindness and respect for sacred matters. However, when the payments for hosting the girls started coming in late, Gertrude's frustration mounted, and she began to mistreat them. This mistreatment involved physical punishments with thick objects, which eventually escalated into regular beatings, starvation, and humiliation. Sylvia faced the brunt of the abuse. Gertrude and her daughter Paula repeatedly accused Sylvia of engaging in inappropriate behavior with boys, which led to Gertrude physically kicking Sylvia in the groin and Paula physically attacking her. The girls were forced to eat food they disliked, and Sylvia was even beaten by Stephanie's boyfriend, Randolph Hubbard. Daily life at the Banfi residence was brutal. Violence escalated over time. Paula's attacks on Sylvia were savage, including punching her in the face and breaking her own wrist. She targeted Sylvia's mouth and eyes, then used her cast to inflict more harm. The sisters faced relentless verbal and psychological abuse, including Gertrude's cruel accusations of promiscuity and forced attacks on each other. The abuse of Sylvia didn't only come from the Banofsky family. Coy Hubbard and his friends would visit Gertrude's home, tormenting Sylvia physically and verbally. Gertrude and her kids would join in, inflicting harm. Neighborhood kids would beat Sylvia, using her as a punching bag, and Gertrude would humiliate her, forcing her to undress and perform sexual acts for their entertainment. Gertrude expelled Sylvia from school as punishment for stealing a gym suit, which Sylvia had done because Gertrude refused to buy her clothes. This cruelty led to severe physical abuse, including beatings with a police belt and kicks to the genitals. Despite Stephanie's attempts to intervene, Gertrude continued to torment them, inflicting further pain by burning their fingertips with matches and whipping them. A few days later, Gertrude again employed the police belt to repeatedly whip Jenny after she allegedly stole a single tennis shoe from school to wear on her stronger foot. Due to the escalating frequency and brutality of the torture and mistreatment, Sylvia gradually became incontinent, a condition for which she was denied access to the bathroom and forced to wet herself as further punishment. On October 6, 1965, Gertrude confined Sylvia to the basement, binding her with rope. She often kept Sylvia naked, providing her with minimal sustenance and frequently denying her water. Sylvia was consistently tied to the stair railing in the basement, her feet barely touching the ground. The Banfi family would occasionally interrupt their physical and emotional torment to watch their favorite TV shows. Neighborhood boys would even pay 5 cents each to view Sylvia's body on display, participating in her humiliation, beating, burning, and mutilation during her captivity in the basement. Gertrude and her children restrained and silenced Sylvia, then submerged her in a bathtub of scorching hot water. Next, they rubbed salt into her injuries. After this incident, an anonymous caller, who was the father of a neighborhood boy named Michael John Monroe, contacted Arsenal School to report that a girl with severe skin lesions was living at the Banfi household. Since Sylvia had been absent from school for several days, a school nurse visited Gertrude's residence to investigate. Gertrude claimed to the nurse that Sylvia had run away from home the previous week and that she was unaware of her current whereabouts. She also alleged that Sylvia's skin lesions were a result of her poor personal hygiene and that she was a negative influence on both her own children and her sister. The school did not pursue any further investigation into Sylvia's whereabouts or well-being. In mid-October, John Benazzi Jr. subjected Sylvia to a cruel and sadistic prank. He offered her a plate of soup, only to swiftly pull it away as she attempted to eat with her hands, which was difficult for her due to her severe malnutrition. Afterwards, Gertrude permitted Sylvia to sleep upstairs, but warned her that she must not wet the bed. Before going to sleep, Sylvia quietly asked Jenny for a glass of water, hoping to avoid dehydration. However, the next morning, Gertrude found that Sylvia had urinated on herself, and as a punishment, forced her to perform a humiliating and degrading act, masturbating with a glass bottle in front of the Banfi children. Shortly thereafter, Gertrude shouted for Sylvia to return to the kitchen, then ordered her to strip naked before proclaiming that she had branded her daughters, and now she was going to brand her. Gertrude began carving the words, "I'm a prostitute and proud of it," onto Sylvia's abdomen with a heated needle. When Gertrude was unable to complete the markings, she instructed 14-year-old Richard Hobbs to finish etching the words into Sylvia's flesh while she took Jenny to a nearby grocery store. In what Hobbs would later insist were short, light etchings, he continued to brand the text into Sylvia's abdomen as she clenched her teeth and moaned. Richard and 10-year-old Shirley forcibly took Sylvia to the basement. There, they attempted to inflict a burn on Sylvia's body, specifically beneath her left breast, using an anchor bolt to create a mark resembling the letter S. However, due to their mistake of applying part of the loop in reverse, the resulting deep burn scar would instead look like the number 3. On that grim night, after enduring terrible abuse, Sylvia told her sister Jenny that she knew Jenny didn't want her to die, but she was sure she was going to die. The next day, Gertrude woke Sylvia and forced her to write a letter while dictating its contents. The plan was sinister. They intended to deceive Sylvia's parents into believing that Sylvia had run away from the Banvey residence. The content of this letter was intended to frame a group of anonymous local boys for extensively abusing and mutilating Sylvia after she had initially agreed to engage in sexual relations with them. After writing the letter, Sylvia was again tied to the basement stair railing, while Gertrude finalized her plan to abandon her in Jimmy's forest with the help of John Jr. and Jenny. Gertrude offered Sylvia cookies, but she refused, saying, "Give them to the dog, I don't want them." Enraged, Gertrude forced the cookies into Sylvia's mouth, and then she and John brutally beat her, targeting her stomach. On the morning of October 26th, Sylvia's condition had deteriorated. She could hardly speak or control her movements. Gertrude brought her to the kitchen, propping her against the wall, and tried to feed her a donut and a glass of milk. However, Sylvia struggled to hold the glass, which further infuriated Gertrude, who tossed her to the floor before returning her to the basement. Soon, Sylvia became delirious, repeatedly moaning and muttering incoherently. When Paula asked her to recite the alphabet, Sylvia couldn't get past the first 4 letters and was unable to stand up from the floor. Sylvia faced neighborhood bullies in the basement. She pointed out familiar faces, shouting names. After a failed attempt to bite a rotten pear, Jenny reminded her she couldn't feel her teeth, having lost one at 7. Exhausted and desperate, Sylvia tried to escape but collapsed. Gertrude punished her brutally, striking her head and knocking her out. Shortly after, at 5:30 p.m., Richard Hobbs returned to the Banvey residence and rushed to the basement, where he found Stephanie crying and cradling Sylvia's frail, wounded body. After their mother instructed Stephanie to clean Sylvia's body, she and Richard decided to give Sylvia a warm, soothing bath and dress her in fresh clothes. They laid her on a mattress in one of the bedrooms, where she whispered her final wish, for her father to be by her side or to be taken home. After suffering severe punishment and weakening from starvation, Sylvia finally succumbed to her injuries and died. When Stephanie realized Sylvia wasn't breathing, she attempted to perform mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, while Gertrude hysterically screamed at the children in the house that Sylvia was faking her own death. Initially, Gertrude struck Sylvia's lifeless body with a book, yelling at her that she was lying and pretending, in a futile attempt to rouse her. Soon, overcome with panic, Gertrude instructed Richard Hobbs to call the authorities from a nearby payphone. When the police arrived at the address around 6:30 p.m., Gertrude escorted the officers to the bedroom, where she revealed Sylvia's brutally beaten and mutilated body lying on a dirty mattress. She then handed over the letter that Sylvia had been coerced into writing. Gertrude claimed to have cared for the young girl for over an hour before her death, applying antiseptic to her wounds in a futile attempt at first aid. According to Gertrude, Sylvia had run away from home with a group of teenagers. Returning to her house that afternoon, bare-chested and clutching the note. Having declared to everyone in the house that Sylvia's death was meant to happen, Paula looked at Jenny and calmly said that if Jenny wanted to live with them, they would treat her like their own sister. Following instructions she had received before the police arrived, Jenny recited the rehearsed version of the events leading up to Sylvia's death, before whispering to the officers to take them away, and that she would tell them everything. The formal statement from Jenny Likens led to the arrest of Gertrude, Paula, Stephanie, and John Jr. Benazzi on suspicion of Sylvia's murder just hours after her body was discovered. That same day, Coy Hubbard and Richard Hobbs were also arrested and charged with the same crimes. The three older Benazzi children, along with Coy Hubbard, were placed in a nearby juvenile detention center, while the younger Benazzi children and Richard Hobbs were held at the Indianapolis Child Guardians Home, all detained without bail pending trial. Initially, Gertrude denied any involvement in Sylvia's death, but only a day into her detention, she confessed to knowing the children and acknowledged that her daughter Paula and Coy Hubbard had physically and emotionally abused Sylvia. Gertrude also admitted to forcing the girl to sleep in the basement on approximately 3 occasions when she had wet the bed. When an officer suggested that the probable reasons for Sylvia's incontinence were her mental distress and kidney injuries, Gertrude became evasive. Paula showed no remorse, signing a statement that admitted to repeatedly beating Sylvia. She also confessed to fracturing Sylvia's wrist and committing other brutal acts, including pushing her down the basement stairs 2 or 3 times. John Jr. confessed to whipping Sylvia once and frequently using his fist to abuse her, also admitting to burning her with matches on multiple occasions. The autopsy of Sylvia's body revealed over 150 separate injuries across her body, and she was severely emaciated at the time of her death. The injuries varied in location, nature, severity, and healing stage, including burns, severe bruises, and extensive damage to muscles and nerves. Her vaginal cavity was swollen and nearly closed, although an examination determined her hymen was still intact, debunking Gertrude's claims that Sylvia had been 3 months pregnant and the accusations of prostitution and promiscuity. The official cause of Sylvia Marie Likens' death was determined to be a subdural hematoma resulting from a severe blow to the right side of her head. The doctor also noted that the shock she sustained, primarily due to prolonged and severe injury to her skin and subcutaneous tissue, as well as chronic malnutrition, contributed to her demise. By the time her body was discovered, rigor mortis had fully set in, suggesting that she may have been deceased for up to 8 hours prior to discovery. Interestingly, although the autopsy revealed that Sylvia had been recently bathed, possibly post-mortem, this action may have accelerated the loss of body temperature and subsequent onset of rigor mortis. In May 1966, Gertrude Bissesi, her children Paula and John, and 2 neighborhood youths, Coy Hubbard and Richard Hobbs, were tried and convicted of neglect, torture, and murder in relation to Sylvia's death. Following 8 hours of deliberation, the jury found Gertrude Bissesi guilty of first-degree murder, sentencing her to life imprisonment. However, she was paroled in 1985. Paula was convicted of second-degree murder and released in 1972. Hobbs, Hubbard, and John were found guilty of manslaughter, serving less than 2 years in the Indiana Reformatory before being granted parole on February 27, 1968. In Indiana, the brutal murder and torture of Sylvia Likens is considered the state's worst crime. A seasoned investigator from the Indiana Police Department, with 35 years of experience, described it as the most sadistic case he had ever encountered. Sylvia tragically lost her life on October 26th in Indianapolis, Indiana, USA. Her parents were expected to return for her and her sister in November, but unfortunately, Sylvia passed away before their arrival. Sylvia and her sister Jenny lived in fear of reporting the escalating abuse and neglect to family members or school authorities. They worried that speaking out would worsen their already desperate situation. Jenny, in particular, struggled to overcome the urge to inform family members, fearing that Gertrude would retaliate by subjecting her to the same torture and abuse as her sister. Additionally, Jenny faced harassment from neighborhood girls who ridiculed and occasionally beat her, whenever she mentioned Sylvia's situation. The middle-aged Besessi couple, along with other families in the neighborhood, had suspicions or had witnessed signs of the girls being mistreated, but they were too afraid to report it to the authorities. Consequently, no one intervened to stop the abuse the Sylvia sisters suffered, and tragically, no one was able to rescue them from their horrific ordeal in time. In the aftermath, all those responsible for her torture and murder received prison sentences, although some did not serve their full terms. However, they cannot escape the guilt and horror they inflicted, which will haunt them for the rest of their lives. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Savannah Gold. In 2017, Sherry's world was turned upside down in Florida when her daughter Savannah failed to show up for work at the restaurant where she was employed. Sherry was unaware that this ordinary day would be the last time she'd see Savannah. An hour later, the restaurant called Sherry to inform her that Savannah hadn't arrived for her shift, which was unusual since she had never missed work before. However, the events that unfolded after that call were even more bizarre. When Savannah's father received a message on her behalf, riddled with spelling mistakes and lacking punctuation, he instantly knew it wasn't his 21-year-old daughter who had written it. The impersonator claimed Savannah had met an amazing guy, fallen in love, and decided to elope with him, promising to call later. Savannah's father, Daniel Gold, carefully read the text message, paying close attention to its content. He knew his daughter well and was convinced that running away with her boyfriend was out of character for her. While Daniel studied his phone screen, trying to make sense of the message, Savannah's older brother Chris received a similar text saying she was leaving with her boyfriend and that she was okay. Daniel's instincts told him something was wrong, so he immediately started calling his daughter's phone, only to find it turned off. Savannah Page Gold was born on April 26, 1996, to Daniel and Sherry Gold. She lived with her parents and older brother Chris in Jacksonville, Florida. Savannah enjoyed various hobbies, including playing lacrosse, drawing, and dancing. Those close to her believed she embodied her last name, being a loving, kind, and caring person always willing to help others. After graduating from high school, Savannah turned down a college scholarship for art and design to care for her mother, Sherry, who had been diagnosed with cancer and was undergoing chemotherapy. To support her mother, Savannah took on household responsibilities and also worked as a waiter at Bonefish Grill, a restaurant. By the summer of 2017, she had been working at the restaurant for 2 years. On August 2nd, Savannah left for work at around 5 p.m., wearing her uniform, as her shift was scheduled to start at 5:30 p.m. However, less than an hour later, Sherry received a call from the restaurant asking why Savannah had not shown up for work. This surprised Sherry, as she knew her daughter was responsible and had seen her leave the house in her uniform, indicating that she had indeed gone to work. After Savannah's father received a suspicious phone call, her father and brother started getting strange messages that they didn't think were from her. They suspected someone was impersonating Savannah. Before this, Savannah's father had tried to contact the police, but he couldn't reach his daughter. She was reported missing, and the police launched a search for her. Since sending those messages, Savannah's phone and social media accounts have been inactive. The police first went to the establishment, where she worked, to investigate. They found her unlocked car in the parking lot, about 120 yards from the restaurant entrance. Her personal documents, wallet, cards, cash, and other valuable items were still inside the car. It was clear to the police that the story about Savannah running away with her lover was a lie. If Savannah had planned to disappear, she would have taken her documents and bank cards with her to avoid being traced. It didn't make sense that she would leave them behind in her car. Initially, there were no signs of a struggle or crime near or inside the car, except for the flat left front tire. Forensic experts were called to investigate, and detectives visited the restaurant to speak with Savannah's co-workers. However, they all claimed that Savannah hadn't come to work that day and that no one had seen her. The presence of Savannah's car, parked 120 yards from the restaurant, led detectives to suspect that something might have happened to her after she arrived at work. They began canvassing local establishments, particularly those with surveillance cameras, to review the footage and identify the moment Savannah parked her car. Although the image quality was poor, the police were able to see from the footage that Savannah parked her car, got out, and walked to a nearby silver Chevrolet Malibu sedan. For 14 minutes, she stood next to the driver's door, talking to the person behind the wheel. She then opened the back door and got in, and the driver followed suit. The police watched as the car shook, and the back door swung open 3 times before being closed again. Officers suspected that a fight had broken out inside the car between Savannah and the Chevrolet's owner. Shortly after, the man exited the car, approached Savannah's vehicle, opened the driver's door, and removed something from inside. He then punctured the front left tire, got back into his vehicle, and drove away without Savannah ever getting out. The owner of the Chevrolet Malibu was quickly identified as Lee Rodarte, a 28-year-old manager and chef at the restaurant where Savannah worked. He had helped distribute flyers with Savannah's picture during the police investigation and claimed not to have seen her for about 3 weeks, citing their different work shifts. However, when detectives re-interviewed restaurant employees, they discovered that Lee and Savannah's relationship went beyond a professional one. Several people came forward to reveal that the two had met secretly after hours and were romantically involved, a fact that Lee had failed to disclose to the police. On August 5th, during his work shift, Rodarte was arrested and taken to the police station for questioning. When he arrived, he immediately warned the detectives that he struggled with reading and writing. In response, they thoroughly explained his rights, including his right to an attorney, and the fact that anything he said could be used against him in court. Rodarte then admitted that he had previously lied to the police when they interviewed the restaurant staff, saying he hadn't seen Savannah in a long time. In reality, he had seen her on the day she went missing, but he was afraid that if he told the truth, he would become a suspect in her disappearance, which is why he had lied. Lee said he had met Savannah about 2 years ago when she started working at the restaurant. However, their socializing outside of work began around 8 months ago. At that time, he was already in a relationship with someone named Chelsea. When Chelsea discovered he had been unfaithful to her, she ended their relationship. Rodarte claims he dated Savannah for 3 months before she started using illegal drugs, which led him to end their relationship and reunite with Chelsea. Following the breakup, Rodarte and Savannah allegedly agreed to maintain a professional relationship limited to their work at the restaurant, as per company policy prohibiting romantic relationships among employees. Rodarte also states that Savannah had disclosed their intimate relationship to other waiters, with the intention of getting him fired. Lee last saw Savannah on a Wednesday afternoon. He drove to the mall on August 2nd to talk to her and persuade her not to spread rumors about their relationship, as he feared losing his job at the restaurant where he had worked for 5 years. When he met her, Savannah had just taken a strong substance and was panicking, so she asked if she could sit in his car for a bit. Once inside, Lee demanded that she stop telling people they were still dating. Savannah asked him to join her in the back seat so they could talk. After moving to the back seat, Lee again asked Savannah to stop spreading rumors, but she refused, saying she would do as she pleased. This response infuriated Lee, who then got out, slashed a tire on Savannah's car, and returned. When Savannah asked why he had done it, Lee admitted he was upset and angry. Next, as Rodarte claimed, Savannah exited his vehicle and headed towards the mall entrance, but didn't reach it. Instead, she got into an old green Ford pickup truck with tinted windows. At this point, she was holding her phone. However, Detectives were aware that Savannah never left Rodate's car and that he was lying. Unbeknownst to Rodate, the police had surveillance footage that disproved his claim, showing no Ford pickup truck and Savannah remaining in his car. When asked about subsequent events, Lee stated that he drove home, even detailing the streets he took. Notably, the man had scratches on his arms and neck, which he attributed to a workplace injury when questioned about their origin. When detectives directly asked Rodate about Savannah's whereabouts, he claimed to have no knowledge. The detectives adjusted their questioning strategy. At first, they listened attentively to his stories, showing interest, but soon they applied gentle pressure. They informed him straightforwardly that evidence contradicted his claim that Savannah had exited his car. After a brief time, Rodate altered his statement, asserting that he and Savannah had gone to his residence, and then she departed. The detectives remained skeptical and urged him to reveal the entire truth, considering Savannah's family's well-being. Rodate ultimately admitted to fatally snapping Savannah's neck during a backseat argument in his vehicle. Following their departure from the parking lot, he sent messages to Savannah's father and brother from her phone before discarding it out the window. Rodate returned the body to his property, intending to dispose of it by fire, but he soon discovered it wasn't as simple as he thought. Instead, he dug a hole and buried the body, only to later exhume it, wrap it in a blanket, and drive approximately 8 miles from the restaurant to a nearby pond, where he discarded the body. Although the autopsy couldn't determine the exact cause of Savannah's death, the examination revealed that her neck wasn't broken, as Rodate had claimed, and no illegal substances were found in her body. However, forensic experts discovered that the thyroid cartilage in Savannah's throat was fractured, suggesting strangulation, and roughly 75% of her body exhibited fire damage. Despite confessing to the crimes, Rodate maintained his not guilty plea on charges of second-degree murder, tampering with evidence, and abuse of a dead body. The autopsy revealed that the condition of Savannah's body was too compromised to determine an exact cause of death. Contrary to Rodate's claims, her neck was not broken, and no illegal substances were found in her system. However, the autopsy did indicate that Savannah was strangled, as her thyroid cartilage was broken and approximately 75% of her body had been burned. Rodate's confession was revoked at trial, where he claimed he acted in self-defense, alleging that Savannah had initiated the strangulation. This reversal put Savannah's family through additional trauma, forcing them to attend numerous court hearings. Cher Gold, Savannah's mother, has battled recurring cancer during this ordeal, but she remains committed to attending every hearing alongside her family. They have been present at 26 out of 27 hearings, enduring the emotional toll of facing Rodate, the man responsible for their daughter's death. The family's primary concern now is to bring this painful process to a close and secure justice for Savannah. Lee Rodate was not the only family member to be charged with murder. In 2016, a year before Lee committed his crime, his sister Amber Camarillo, then 26 and still known by her maiden name Rodate, shot and killed a woman during a dispute over a car. She received a 20-year prison sentence. Lee Rodate was offered a plea deal, which required him to plead guilty to second-degree murder in exchange for a 40-year prison sentence. In return, the charges of tampering with physical evidence and abuse of the body would be dropped. After consulting with his attorneys, Rodate accepted the deal and was sentenced to 40 years in prison on March 11, 2021. Following the verdict, Savannah's family expressed gratitude to everyone for their support. Daniel Gold stated that they loved Savannah and were overwhelmed to discover how many others also cared for her. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Shanae Brooke Edwards. Shanae Brooke Edwards was born in 1989 in Warrnambool, Australia. Shanae grew up with her parents and older brother Tyson. Although her early life and upbringing are not well documented, her loved ones remembered her as an adventure seeker who loved nature, hiking, motorcycling, and animals. She was a kind-hearted, genuine person who formed deep, sincere connections with others, showing generosity, patience, love, and kindness to everyone she met. In 2019, Sinead traveled to Georgia, a country that had long fascinated her with its natural beauty, rich history, and landmarks. Her boyfriend, Mauri El Sayed, a Lebanese national, had planned to join her in Georgia, but was unable to do so because the country's borders were closed to unvaccinated individuals at the time. Sinead resided in Tbilisi, the capital of Georgia, where she worked as an English teacher. This allowed her to support herself financially while exploring the country and visiting new destinations. She formed close bonds with like-minded friends who shared her passion for travel. On July 29, 2021, Sinead uploaded a photo to her social media profile, captioning it with the single word, joy. The image was taken during a scenic motorcycle ride, an activity she thoroughly enjoyed. The following day, July 30, 2021, Sinead decided to hike up Mtatsminda, a popular tourist attraction situated in the heart of Tbilisi. According to her friends, Sinead would often take leisurely strolls in the wooded area near the mountain, and she had never encountered any issues or threats to her personal safety. On July 30, 2021, Sinead left her residence around 3:30 p.m. and was last spotted near the Church of St. Michael of Tavare, located at the foot of Mount Mtatsminda, which serves as a starting point for hikers. Sinead was scheduled to meet friends at a cafe in the capital city, but she failed to appear. When attempts to reach her by phone proved unsuccessful, her friends decided to file a missing persons report with the local authorities. Meanwhile, a friend of Sinead's living in California grew concerned and placed a call to Sinead's phone. When the call was answered, Sinead could be heard screaming, "Please let me go, okay? Just let me go," indicating that she was being attacked and desperately seeking release. The call was abruptly disconnected, and when Sinead's friend tried to call back, there was no answer. There are conflicting accounts of what Sinead's friend in California did next. According to some reports, she posted an urgent message to a Facebook group comprised of expats living in Georgia, asking someone to alert the police to the disturbing phone call. Other sources claim that Sinead's friend directly contacted the Georgian police and relayed the distressing details. It is certain that within hours of Sinead making a frightening phone call, Georgian police became aware of it and began to investigate. Hundreds of police officers and volunteers were deployed to search the area, focusing on the slopes of Mount Mtatsminda. The search party utilized search dogs and drones, but Sinead remained missing. By sunset, her phone was still off, and she had not visited any local hospitals. This lack of progress was ominous, as was confirmed the following day. Tragically, on July 31st, after an extensive search, 31-year-old Sinead Brooke Edwards was discovered deceased near a hiking trail. The perpetrator attempted to conceal evidence by hiding the body under tree branches and leaves. A knife, believed to be the crime weapon, was found nearby. Sinead's phone was soon discovered on the mountainside. Further inspection of the crime scene revealed an old, rusty shovel, a fireplace, used needles, and numerous empty bottles. Georgia's Interior Minister revealed to local media that the police have uncovered information not yet disclosed to the public to protect the integrity of the investigation. He assured that the ministry and police officers are doing everything possible to find the perpetrator. The forensic examination of Sinead's body revealed 13 stab wounds, with 5 in the neck area, leading the police to conclude that the perpetrator undoubtedly intended to kill the young woman. Signs of strangulation were also found on her neck. After the authorities officially confirmed Sinead's death, the media reported that the crime was motivated by lust, but the Georgian police denied this, citing the forensic medical examiner's failure to find any signs of a crime against the woman's integrity. Sinead's boyfriend, Mollie El Sayed, has vowed to track down the culprit, no matter how long it takes, and exact revenge. Sinead's death was a devastating blow to her friends, and a particularly traumatic experience for her family, who lived on another continent. They faced the difficult task of transporting her body back home while the police worked to identify the perpetrator. Although the police are directly responsible for preventing crimes and capturing criminals, in this case, there was an added concern. Georgia's billion-dollar tourism industry could be severely impacted by the fact that a tourist had lost her life in the capital city, a popular tourist destination. The police conducted an extensive investigation, interviewing over 200 people, including Sinead's friends, co-workers, neighbors, and employees and visitors of Matatsminda Park. They examined the roots of the case and reviewed video footage of Sinead's movements on the day she went missing. In an expat Facebook group, a local woman reported hearing a woman screaming on the trails below Matatsminda Park around an hour after Sinead left home. Another woman in the same group claimed to have witnessed a disturbing scene on the mountain the day before Sinead went missing, in which a man was seen aggressively assaulting a woman in the same area where the crime eventually took place. At the same time, the laboratory analyzed the crime weapon and discovered a male DNA sample, but no matches were found in the Georgian police database. Consequently, the samples were sent to the databases of 194 Interpol member states for further checking. Witness interviews revealed that Sinead had no enemies, no history of conflict with anyone, and no association with individuals of questionable character, suggesting she may have been a random victim of a crime with an unclear motive. The police conducted a meticulous investigation, collecting genetic samples from several dozen individuals who could potentially have been involved in the crime, and subjected each to rigorous scrutiny. Following a thorough and multifaceted investigation, authorities were able to narrow down the list of suspects until they found a DNA match. 40 days after Sinead Brooke Edwards' death, the Georgia police released a statement announcing the arrest of a 33-year-old man, Rafael Marsokolov, a Georgian citizen born in 1988. The evidence gathered during the investigation, including testimony, surveillance footage, genetic tests, and other proof, led to his arrest on September 8th. Marsokolov's lawyer stated that his client denies all charges, including robbery and the murder of Sinead Brooke Edwards, and has pleaded not guilty. The lawyer claimed that Marsokolov was not involved in the case and has chosen to exercise his right to remain silent. After Marsokolov's identity was made public, his image was broadcast on television. A woman from the Georgian capital took to Facebook to share a post revealing that her friend had been attacked by two men on Mount Matatsminda a few months prior. And although the police were aware of the perpetrators' identities, the case was closed. She suggested that if the police had done their job properly, the Australian girl might still be alive. Additionally, Marsokolov's own Facebook page revealed that he was an activist for the ruling Georgian Dream Party. On September 10, 2021, the Tbilisi court denied Marsokolov's request to be released on bail while awaiting trial, instead keeping him in custody. The police had obtained strong physical evidence, as well as damning testimony from Marsokolov's brother and wife, who revealed that Marsokolov had confessed to the crime at home. He warned them that if they told anyone about his involvement in Sinead Brooke Edwards' attack, their young child would face the same fate. In October 2021, the Edwards family wrote a heartfelt letter describing Sinead's personality and expressing gratitude to everyone who had supported them. They specifically thanked the government of Georgia for its financial assistance in repatriating Sinead's body and the Georgian people for their ongoing love, attention, and support during this difficult and tragic period. In February 2022, the first hearing on the case took place under Georgian law. Marsokolov faced a possible sentence of 16 to 20 years in prison. At the trial, he chose not to remain silent and pleaded guilty to robbery. However, he denied intentionally taking Sinead's life. The prosecutor disagreed, pointing out that the 13 stab wounds, including 5 to the neck, indicated Marsokolov's intent to kill the victim. After his knife broke, he even strangled Shanae. The defense claimed that Markelov has mental health issues and was in an abnormal state when the crime occurred. However, a psychological examination found him to be sane, allowing the court to impose a meaningful punishment based on the severity of the crime. The prosecutor noted that Markelov's blood tested positive for powerful drugs at the time of his arrest, but this did not diminish his guilt. Markelov admitted his guilt and apologized to Shanae Brooke Edwards' family in his final statement. According to the alleged motive, Markelov had intended to steal Shanae's iPhone 12, but his plan was foiled when she threw the phone into a ravine. Only 2 people knew what happened that day, and sadly, one of them is no longer alive to tell the tale. The prosecution requested a postponement of the sentencing, as the victim's brother, Tyson Edwards, wanted to attend the hearing. In a statement, Shanae Brooke Edwards' family urged the Georgian justice system to impose a life imprisonment sentence on Rafael Markelov, citing the tragic and devastating loss of their loved one, who left behind many grieving friends and family members. On March 9, 2022, a trial was held, at which Rafael Markelov was found guilty. Representing the family, Shanae's brother Tyson again requested that the defendant be given a life sentence. Markelov apologized to Tyson Edwards, claiming he was not that kind of person and had simply found himself in this situation. Ultimately, 33-year-old Rafael Markelov was sentenced to 20 years imprisonment, the maximum penalty allowed under Georgian law. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Diane Holick. Diane Holick, a 43-year-old senior executive at IBM, was known for her reliability. So when she missed a scheduled work call on the morning of November 16, 2001, her colleagues were immediately concerned. Unable to reach her, they alerted the police, asking them to check on her at home. The officers' discovery at her house was gruesome. Born in 1958 in New York City, Diane was a driven person who had built a successful career at IBM, one of the world's largest hardware and software companies. Over 20 years, her hard work had earned her a senior position, allowing her to work from her home office in Austin, Texas, where she had moved in 1996. Diane lived a luxurious life in the suburbs, hosting wine-tasting parties, frequenting expensive restaurants and dance clubs, and engaging in charity work. She was also trying to improve her personal life. In mid-November 2001, a severe storm warning was in effect in Texas, bringing torrential rains and tornadoes to Austin. On the morning of November 16th, Diane worked from home, but her company had scheduled a work call. Despite having multiple phones, including her home phone, she stopped answering all of them. Her colleagues left messages asking her to call back, and they soon became concerned when she didn't respond. They contacted the police department and requested that someone be sent to Diane's house to check on her welfare. When the officers arrived, Diane's neighbor, who had a spare key, noticed their presence. The police entered the house, where they were met with complete silence, broken only by the sound of dogs emerging from the kitchen. As they received no response from Diane, they began to search the house. In the second-floor bedroom, they made the grim discovery of Diane Holick's lifeless body. Diane's home was one of the cleanest crime scenes detectives had ever encountered. Her body, fully dressed, lay in the bedroom next to her bed. Strangulation marks on her neck, resembling those left by a rope, and signs of wrist binding with cable ties, indicated a crime had taken place. The lack of theft, struggle, or forced entry led detectives to suspect that Diane's killer was someone she knew and trusted. There was no evidence of forced intimacy before her death, but dark spots and red stains on the carpet near the bedroom entrance suggested a possible struggle. One anomaly in the otherwise tidy home caught the detectives' attention. A towel lying on the back of the living room sofa seemed out of place. They sent it to the laboratory for analysis, hoping it might provide a crucial clue. The police spoke to the people who knew Diane and found that she didn't have any known enemies. although it's possible that some might have been unknown. During their investigation, they discovered that Diane was in a romantic relationship with Dennis Conley, the man she wanted to spend the rest of her life with. This wasn't her first marriage. Her previous one had ended quickly. Diane and Dennis met through a dating service, and he had 2 children from a previous marriage. Dennis was a businessman living in Houston, around 150 miles from Austin, where Diane resided. Despite the distance and infrequent meetings, they grew close quickly, and after 2 months of communicating, Dennis proposed to Diane, giving her a $17,500 platinum ring. She accepted his proposal. According to Diane's close friends, her relationship with Dennis had begun to deteriorate recently. As an independent woman focused on building her career, Diane felt uneasy with Dennis's occasional attempts to control her. Another issue was the decision to move to Houston. The couple had decided to start their life together in his hometown, so Diane put her suburban Austin home up for sale. However, realtors struggled to find a buyer willing to pay the $435,000 asking price for the property. Detectives investigated whether Dennis was involved in Diane's death, asking him to come to the police station for a voluntary conversation without an attorney. Dennis agreed and spoke candidly with the detectives. The medical examiner's report indicated that Diane died between 3 p.m. on November 15th and 3 a.m. on November 16th. A strange detail caught their attention. Diane's wedding ring, given to her by Dennis, was missing from her finger, while her other jewelry in the bedroom remained untouched. This led to the theory that the killer had a personal motive or deliberately removed the ring to mislead the investigation. Dennis presented himself as a grieving person. The detectives asked him about his relationship with Diane and his whereabouts on the day of her death and the day her body was found. According to Dennis, he was in Houston at the time, claiming he last spoke with Diane on the morning of November 15th. He spent the entire day at work, without contacting her again the following morning. When he couldn't reach her, he left a voicemail, unaware of her death. Dennis acknowledged that their relationship was troubled, revealing recent arguments before concluding the conversation. The police collected his fingerprints and a DNA sample, but it was possible he could have traveled to Austin, interacted with Diane, and returned to Houston by the next morning. However, after verifying his alibi, the detectives determined he had not left the city, so they had to pursue another suspect. Before leaving the police station, Dennis provided a crucial lead that changed the direction of the investigation, pointing out that Rye, one of Diane's co-workers, had shown an unusual interest in her. The detectives looked into this and found that Rye frequently visited Diane's home and sometimes walked her dogs, but he had a solid alibi, ruling him out as a suspect. When speaking with Diane's colleagues, the authorities discovered that a mysterious individual had inspected her house a few days before her death. He claimed he would make a cash offer if he liked the property, and planned to return with his wife in a few days to make a joint decision on the purchase. As this was one of the few leads the police had, they concentrated all their efforts on finding this unknown buyer, hoping someone might have seen him when he visited Diane's house. The detectives decided to investigate the owners of properties for sale in the area where Diane lived, suspecting that the mysterious buyer might have viewed more than just the victim's house. They conducted interviews with the owners and discovered that 7 women had experienced a similar incident. A 35 to 45-year-old man with a prominent nose and dark hair, styled back, had visited their homes on the day of Diane's death, without a real estate agent present. While 6 women had refused him entry, 1 woman had allowed him inside. According to her, the man's behavior became strange after entering the house. He didn't show any interest in the rooms or doors, and only asked her to show him the second-floor bedroom. She sensed something was off and asked him to leave. Notably, he had introduced himself as Walter Miller when requesting permission to view the property. The police searched their databases for the name Walter Miller in Austin, but found 2 individuals with that name, neither of whom matched the age or physical description of the suspect. As detectives probed the motive behind the crime, they wondered why the thief had only taken the wedding ring, and whether they might have stolen other jewelry or cash, given the victim's wealth and history of living alone, which made it impossible to determine the extent of her jewelry collection. They also questioned the significance of the perpetrator removing the cable ties that bound Diane's hands and taking them with him. Did he know her personally? The autopsy revealed no signs of sexual assault prior to Diane's death, and her body was found fully clothed. Despite this, the detectives returned to her home to search for any traces of semen, assuming the perpetrator might have left behind some evidence. However, their search yielded nothing. A composite sketch of a potential suspect was broadcast on evening news programs, urging anyone with information about a similar individual to come forward. One of the few leads available to investigators was a few strands of hair found on a towel at Diane's residence. Although the hair lacked roots, preventing a complete DNA analysis, detectives remained hopeful that a partial DNA profile could still yield results. A woman contacted the police after seeing the composite sketch, which she believed resembled a suspect in the Diane Hollick case. During her interview with detectives, she recounted how she and her husband had listed their house for sale 6 months prior. A man had arrived, claiming he wanted to purchase the property with cash, but needed to view it first. Since no real estate agent was present, she refused to let the stranger inside. 2 months later, the same man reappeared on her doorstep, introducing himself as Jim Taylor. With her husband away at work and only her young daughter present, the man again asked to enter the house. When she denied his request, he became agitated, shouting and insisting that he be allowed inside. The woman threatened to call the police, prompting the would-be buyer to leave. Still shaken, she wrote down the man's name and the license plate number of his minivan, which had been parked in her driveway. When she saw the suspect's portrait on the news, she immediately recognized him as the same person who had come to her house a while back. This new information led the police to obtain the license plate number, which they then used to identify the vehicle's owner through their database. However, the owner's name was not Jim Taylor, as they had initially suspected, but rather Patrick Anthony Russo. At first, it seemed unlikely that Russo was involved in Diane's death. He appeared to be a family man, living 40 minutes from Austin with his wife and 2 children, and even played in a local church music band. But as the police dug deeper into his past, they discovered a more sinister history. Russo was an ex-convict who had served time for a series of attacks on women. One of these attacks had even escalated to abduction, where he had tied his victim up with cable ties and attempted to strangle her, stopping only at the last moment. For this crime, he had been sentenced to 20 years in prison. While serving his sentence, Anthony Russo met his future wife Janet, a volunteer at the prison's church program. Despite his lengthy criminal record, Russo was granted parole after serving 8 years of his 20-year sentence. The police was skeptical about the coincidence, so they obtained a search warrant for Anthony Russo's residence. When the police arrived, Anthony answered the door, but they found no incriminating evidence inside his house, including Diane's ring or any other personal belongings. A subsequent search of his minivan also yielded nothing. However, the neighbors reported seeing a similar vehicle parked outside Diane's house on the day of her murder. Significantly, the police discovered several cable ties in the utility room that matched the ones that left marks on Diane's wrists. Although we might consider the tie as evidence, it's still indirect because anyone can purchase it at a hardware store. The investigator informed Anthony that his name had come up during an investigation and asked him to come to the station for a more in-depth conversation. At the station, the investigators asked Russo about his whereabouts on November 15th and 16th. Russo explained that on Thursday, the 15th, he traveled to Austin to visit a religious radio station but was unable to enter because no one answered the door. Coincidentally, this radio station is located near Diane Hall's house. According to Russo, he headed home around 4 p.m. but got slightly lost due to a hurricane, which delayed his arrival until around 6 p.m. When the police questioned Russo about his intentions to purchase a house, he claimed he had never browsed any properties for sale. This response proved to be pivotal, as it would later have significant repercussions. Upon being shown a photograph of Diane, Russo remained expressionless and denied ever having met her. Although the police were unable to find any evidence linking Russo to the crime, they were forced to release him. However, the following day, detectives visited the radio station Russo had mentioned and uncovered evidence that his previous statement about the closed doors was a fabrication. The employees at the station revealed that they had not closed the doors, as a large crowd had gathered in the lobby due to an approaching tornado. Meanwhile, a second woman approached the police after encountering a man who resembled the suspect's sketch while trying to sell her house. When the stranger came to her door with a pamphlet featuring local house listings, including her own, she let him in to view the property under the pretense that he would make a cash offer. However, when she showed him a bedroom, he attempted to attack her, but retreated hastily upon hearing her child cry in the adjacent room. The quick-thinking woman retained the pamphlet, which held a crucial fingerprint that the police later matched to Anthony Russo. Russo's claim of never having looked at houses for sale was thus discredited, and his false statement constituted a misdemeanor, a probation violation. Russo's arrest was prompted by his failure to meet parole conditions. Fearing he might flee while they gathered evidence linking him to Diane's death, authorities deemed it necessary to detain him. The police tracked down 15 women who had shown Russo around their homes. All of these women were later brought in to identify the suspect. In a lineup, the women saw 5 men, including Anthony Russo, all dressed similarly and with similar appearances. Each of these men repeated the phrase, "You have a beautiful house," in turn. 10 of the 15 women identified Anthony Russo as the man who had viewed their homes prior to purchasing. The other 5 women were unable to make a positive identification. When the police questioned Russo again, he knew he had been caught lying. Despite this, he continued to proclaim his innocence. At one point, he requested to see his wife and then refused to answer any more questions. The detectives soon received a report from the laboratory, which confirmed that the mitochondrial sequence of the hair found on the towel at Diane's house matched Anthony Russo's DNA. While this was a significant finding, it was not conclusive, as there was a small chance, 1 in 12,900,000, according to court documents, that the hair could have belonged to someone else. Although the investigation had accumulated a significant amount of circumstantial evidence, there was no single piece of direct evidence linking Russo to Diane Hollick's death. One additional piece of circumstantial evidence, however, was the report on the location of his cell phone, which placed Russo in the same area where Diane lived on the day she died. After examining the computer seized from his house, experts found a disturbing search history. Russo, a 37-year-old father of 2 and regular churchgoer, frequently visited an adult website. On this site, he watched videos and read articles about strangulation during intimate interactions. Notably, access to these materials required payment. Even more alarming was the discovery that just days before Diane's death, Russo read a story about a man who posed as a buyer to enter a lonely woman's home, strangled her, and then stole valuables, making it seem like a robbery to conceal his true motive of satisfying a desire for strangulation. The detectives conducted a thorough investigation into Russo and his wife's financial situation. Despite having only $2,000 in savings, Russo claimed to be in the market for a new home, which raised suspicions. Furthermore, the couple had yet to pay off the mortgage on their current residence. although there was no concrete evidence to prove this. On February 5, 2004, more than 2 years after Diane Hollick's death, the police arrested Anthony Russo on suspicion of her murder. During his trial, 14 women took the stand, testifying under oath that Russo had approached them about purchasing a house. Several of these women reported that Russo had visited them on the day of Diane's death, although they refused to let him into their homes. One woman, however, initially allowed him in before asking him to leave due to his unusual behavior. Notably, all the women Russo targeted were of a similar age, suggesting that he had been observing them before making his move. Russo appeared to have a specific type of woman in mind. The prosecution presented the evidence again, describing the events of that fateful November day. As previously stated, Diane informed a colleague that a potential buyer had visited to view the house. Prosecutors suggested that Russo learned Diane lived alone when he first saw the house on November 15th. He toured homes for sale, but only one woman, Diane, let him inside. On his return to Diane's house, Russo likely asked to view the property again, but this time with a sinister motive, carefully planning his actions to avoid leaving evidence. On the rainy day, Diane unexpectedly offered him a towel to dry his hands and face, which he carelessly discarded on the back of the sofa. As she showed him the house again, Russo attacked her on the second floor. Prosecutors believed Russo derived pleasure from strangling, ultimately causing Diane's death during their second encounter. Before leaving, Russo stole cable ties and Diane's wedding ring, which the police were unable to find. He locked the door using a spare key kept at the front door. Russo's former and current wives testified in court, and both claimed that Anthony Russo took pleasure in the act of strangulation. It's notable that this was not his first offense, as he had a prior conviction for a similar crime. After deliberating for 11 hours, the jury found Patrick Anthony Russo guilty, and the court sentenced him to life in prison. Despite his history of criminal behavior, Russo never admitted to his guilt. He will become eligible for parole again and can file his first parole petition in 2044, at which point he will be over 80 years old. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Christina Carlin Craft. Christina Rose Carlin Craft was born on November 11, 1983, in a coastal town in southern New Jersey, to Stuart Craft and Deanne Carlin. She had a natural flair for being in front of the camera, which would eventually shape her career path. After graduating from high school in Linwood in 2000, Christina worked as a waitress in southern New Jersey and later at the Borgata Hotel Casino and Spa in Atlantic City for several years. However, her ultimate dream was to become a model, and her determination paid off. She eventually found success in the modeling industry. In her promotional material, Christina revealed that she enjoyed participating in photo shoots featuring high-end lingerie and swimwear. According to Eva Waltz, a friend she met on a 3-day Maxim magazine shoot, Christina was a charming and beautiful woman with a great sense of humor. With dark hair and blue eyes, she embodied the essence of a fashion model. Christina had always dreamed of being on the cover of Playboy. In 2003, while working as a waitress at the Borgata Casino, she met Alex Urtielli. They started dating soon after, and Alex became her supportive partner, never opposing her career choices. After a long-term relationship, they got engaged. The couple stayed together until Christina's death. Christina achieved her goal of becoming Cyber Girl of the Month for May 2009 and was invited to the Playboy Mansion. She attended parties at the mansion, gaining entry into the glamorous world. This success marked the peak of her career, and her ambitions soared, especially after meeting Hugh Hefner, whose attention was hard to capture. However, despite this, Christina failed to become a Playboy magazine model. Thousands of girls send their photos to the magazine, but only one is chosen. At 26, Christina was considered too old for the magazine, which typically features younger models. This setback affected her confidence, but she continued modeling. Her extensive portfolio included work with Redken, Moxham, Victoria's Secret, Vanity Fair, and many others. To further her career, Christina moved to New York with her boyfriend Alex. However, not all brands were willing to work with her due to her explicit photo shoot. Christina's career began to decline after her appearance in Playboy, ultimately coming to an end. Overcoming this challenging period in her life was undoubtedly tough, but she always had Alex's support. Known for her elegant appearance, captivating beauty, and scandalous behavior, Christina made headlines in 2016 for causing a scene at the Smith, a restaurant in New York. According to law enforcement sources and court documents, Christina Carlin Craft, 34, and her male companion got into an argument with the manager, Sergei Anakin, on March 6th over their bill. The man refused to pay, and the manager intervened. Witnesses claim Christina was drunk and falsely accused the manager of pushing her. But surveillance footage proved otherwise. She allegedly struck someone in the neck around 10 p.m., causing redness and significant pain. Christina was charged with misdemeanor assault, attempted assault, and harassment. However, the DA offered her a deal, and the charges were dropped on the condition that she remains trouble-free for 6 months. Christina has always had a fondness for Philadelphia, particularly Ardmore, which she considered a safe haven. With this in mind, Alex purchased an apartment in Ardmore in 2018 and relocated to Pennsylvania with her. However, Christina soon discovered that Ardmore wasn't as safe as she had thought. On August 18, 2018, she contacted the police to report a robbery. Earlier that evening, Christina had spent time at a bar in Philadelphia, but her memories of the night were hazy. The next thing she recalled was waking up the following morning, feeling groggy and suspecting that someone had drugged her with illegal substances. She had no recollection of how she got home or if anyone had accompanied her. At the time, Alex was away on a business trip. Feeling uneasy and anxious, Christina repeatedly expressed her concerns about her safety. During the investigation, police obtained CCTV footage showing a car arriving at Christina's apartment around 3 a.m. Unconscious in the back seat, Christina was being driven by a thief who stole her keys, entered her home, and plundered over $50,000 worth of valuables, including jewelry, designer bags, pillows, sunglasses, a credit card, and personal documents. The thief remained in the apartment for about an hour and a half before returning to the car, helping Christina inside, and then leaving her in the hallway. They placed the keys back in her purse and drove away. The police swiftly identified the perpetrator using a credit card statement. The driver was Andre Melton, a man with a prior criminal record. He was driving a rented 2018 Kia Sorento with Virginia license plates. Witnesses reported seeing the same car near Christina's house on August 17th, which was confirmed by police using specialized license plate recognition software. While the police were still searching for Andre Melton to recover Christina's stolen items, a far more serious crime took place. Just 4 days later, on August 22, 2018, Alex Chelly called the police, asking them to check on his girlfriend, Christina Carlin Craft, as he was unable to contact her and was on his way home. Christina wasn't answering her calls or texts. Upon arriving home, Alex found the apartment door locked from the inside. He then checked the security system, revealing that someone had opened the front door and the balcony door during the night. The police were called to the address and had to force entry by breaking down the front door, which was locked from the inside. Upon entering the apartment, they were immediately met with signs of a crime scene, including visible blood. A body lay on the bed, covered with a blanket. Lifting the blanket, they found a woman who had been severely beaten. Unfortunately, it was Christina Carlin Craft, and she was already dead. Her body showed signs of blows all over, and her nose was broken. There was also a strangulation mark around her neck. It was later discovered that Christina had been strangled with her own sweatpants. When the detectives identified the victim, they had to break the devastating news to Alex, who was waiting outside. His beloved Christina was dead. This shocking revelation sparked immediate suspicion, as the people closest to the victim are often implicated in such cases. The police did not dismiss the possibility that Alex might be the perpetrator. Alex and Christina had a long history together, and anything could have transpired between them. It was Alex who had contacted the police station, expressing concern for Christina's safety, only for her to be found dead soon after. These events seemed too coincidental. It was possible that Alex had orchestrated the scenario to divert suspicion away from himself. The investigators requested that Alex accompany them to the police station to answer some questions. He agreed without hesitation. During the questioning, Alex explained that he had an urgent work commitment in New York on August 21st and had planned to return. The following night, August 22nd, at 2:30 a.m., he called Christina to bid her good night, but she didn't answer. Given her habitual wakefulness at this hour, Alex grew anxious. He made several more calls, but Christina remained unresponsive. After reviewing the security system, he discovered suspicious activity in the apartment that night, prompting him to relinquish his business and rush back to Ardmore. After hearing Alex's story, the police no longer believed he was responsible for Christina's murder. His alibi checked out, and he couldn't have been in two places at once. They cleared him as a suspect, but the question remained: who killed Christina? Who would want her dead? The investigators looked into Christina's report of a robbery 4 days before her murder, suspecting a connection between the two crimes. This led them to Andre Melton, the thief who stole from Christina's apartment. Maybe he returned to steal again, but his plan was foiled when Christina caught him. Perhaps he discovered she had reported him to the police and decided to take revenge. On August 22nd, the day Christina's body was found, the police obtained an arrest warrant for Andre Melton. When they went to his address, however, they discovered he was no longer there. Despite his absence, they did find some of Christina's belongings still at the location. The police also managed to obtain surveillance footage from the night of the crime, which showed Christina leaving her apartment, then returning a few hours later with an unknown man. The footage was recorded at 3:08 a.m., and surprisingly, the man was not Andre Melton. Further analysis of the footage revealed that the unknown man did not leave Christina's apartment again. The police later found an explanation for this using CCTV cameras on the streets of Ardmore. They discovered that Christina had visited a Philadelphia bar before returning to her apartment. Investigators reviewed the CCTV footage from the bar, which showed Christina meeting a man who later hugged her. This was the same man she had returned to her apartment with. After leaving the bar, Christina and her new friend were involved in an altercation. In the days that followed, detectives worked to reconstruct Christina's movements on the day she died, gathering data to piece together the events leading up to the crime. The police quickly ruled out Melton as a suspect, as he was not with Christina on the day of her death. However, it remained unclear whether her death was connected to the earlier robbery or simply a coincidence. On August 25th, the police received a new lead. Andrew Sanford, the taxi driver who had driven Christina and her companion that night, came forward. According to Sanford, Christina and the man had hailed him down rather than using the taxi app and had negotiated the fare. Sanford reported that the couple seemed affectionate and did not arouse his suspicion. When they arrived at their destination, Christina got out and directed Sanford where to go. It turned out that she didn't have any cash and offered to leave her credit card, but Sanford declined. Her friend then offered him $100 to wait for 10 to 15 minutes while they went inside. Sanford left 20 minutes later, as neither Christina nor her companion had returned. The couple, Christina and Alex, entered their second-floor apartment around 3 a.m. About an hour later, at 4 a.m., Christina made a call to her cousin, but she didn't speak. Instead, her cousin heard a man's voice in the background, warning Christina not to call the police. The call abruptly ended before the cousin could gather more information. It remains unclear why the cousin didn't call 911 after hearing this. The police were able to piece together the crime's timeline thanks to the door sensors in the apartment, which recorded exact times for each door opening. The records showed that someone opened the door at 3:08 a.m. and again at 5:10 a.m. Around the same time, the system detected that someone had opened the sliding glass door on the balcony, which explained why the surveillance cameras didn't capture the moment when the man Christina met at the bar left. When the police arrived after Alex's call, they found Christina alone in the apartment, leading them to assume that the perpetrator had jumped off the balcony. Police sought public's help through media, releasing surveillance images of two men, Andre Melton and the one at Christina's apartment the night she died. In a surprising turn of events, Andre Melton, whose whereabouts were still unknown to the detectives, contacted the police himself. He confessed to stealing valuables from Christina, but vehemently denied any involvement in her murder. The police were perplexed by this unexpected call, as they were still unable to establish a definitive link between the theft and Christina's death. It was possible that this was all part of a strategy devised by the two suspects. It seemed that Melton's intention was not to surrender to the authorities, but to proclaim his innocence in Christina's murder. On August 26th, the police station received an anonymous call from a man who claimed to know one of the suspects featured in the released pictures. He shared a room with the suspect at a psychiatric clinic in Philadelphia. The caller revealed that the suspect had previously chased a woman in Love Park, Philadelphia, and followed her into the local family court building, where he molested her and became aggressive, shouting and causing destruction. The incident led to a 2-hour stay in a psychiatric hospital, costing $70. However, the suspect was admitted without being identified, as no one wanted to deal with him. The police were left with a mystery on their hands. The caller then provided even more critical information, stating that the suspect bragged about recently strangling a woman, taking great pleasure and satisfaction from the act. Upon hearing this, investigators strongly believed that they had found the killer of Christina Carlin Craft. The police station received another call from a man who claimed to be a relative of the suspect from Philadelphia. He identified the man in the photo as Jonathan Wesley Harris, who had previously served a prison sentence for robbery. Harris was released from prison on July 15th, just 5 weeks before Christina's death. After conducting a thorough background check, investigators concluded that Andre Melton and Jonathan Harris had no connection and had never crossed paths before. Therefore, the police ruled out any possibility of a link between the two crimes. Furthermore, the police gained access to Harris's phone records, which revealed that he had sent several messages on August 22nd. One of the texts mentioned that he had met an attractive woman and was planning to visit her apartment on August 28th. With this new evidence, the police obtained an arrest warrant for Jonathan Harris and deemed it crucial to apprehend him as soon as possible, as they were unsure of his next move. However, tracking Harris down proved to be a challenge, as he had left no trace. Investigators finally got a break when they contacted Harris's sister on August 29, 2018, and learned that he had recently purchased a bus ticket to Pittsburgh. Unfortunately, they discovered that Harris was already on the bus when they spoke with his sister. The police realized they wouldn't be able to catch up with him, leaving the Pittsburgh police as their last hope. It was essential to be in the right place at the right time to apprehend Harris. The police investigating Christina's death reached out to the Pittsburgh Law Enforcement Agency for assistance. They provided the exact time of the bus's arrival in Pittsburgh and sent over a photo of Harris. The fugitive task force then set up an ambush, blocking all potential escape routes, ready to apprehend the suspect at a moment's notice. Shortly after, one of the employees spotted the bus approaching. They allowed Harris time to calmly disembark, avoiding any sudden moves that might provoke a reaction. About 10 minutes later, a policeman intercepted him. I saw his eyes scanning, searching for an escape route, but it was too late. According to a Pittsburgh police officer, when the officer asked Harris to identify himself, he provided a false name. He was subsequently arrested and taken into custody at the police station. Detectives from Philadelphia traveled to Pittsburgh to question Harris. They requested that he recount the events of the night he met Christina. Harris claimed to have seen her on multiple occasions at bars and nightclubs in Philadelphia. Christina Carling Craft was struggling to adjust to her new life in New York, which had drastically altered her daily routine and environment. As a result, she would frequently visit bars, cafes, and nightclubs, but she was always by herself since Alex was constantly working and she had not yet formed new friendships. It was common for men at these establishments to approach her, taking advantage of her solo status. Harris was one of those men. Harris claimed he was drunk and high on illegal drugs when he met Christina. They had a drink, then went to her place, where they drank more and had consensual sex. Harris demanded $1,200, but Christina refused, sparking a heated argument. Harris said she hit him with a wine bottle, so he hit her back, causing her to fall. When she tried to call the police, he strangled her with sweatpants until she passed out. Jonathan Harris's story had inconsistencies. A toxicology report on Christina's body found only alcohol, contradicting his claim of a single hit. When confronted, he admitted lying. Initially, Harris denied involvement, but later confessed to beating her, saying, "I panicked," and covering her because he didn't want to see her. When the trial began, Harris, despite having confessed to the crime, pleaded not guilty, like many other criminals who later retract their confessions. However, the investigators had assembled a substantial amount of evidence, making it difficult for Harris and his lawyer to build a strong defense. They anticipated a sentence of 22 to 40 years for third-degree murder and attempted to avoid a life sentence. Nevertheless, the prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence that convinced the court that the crime was premeditated. During the trial, the court heard testimony from a man who had shared a room with Harris at a psychiatric clinic. This same man had previously contacted the police. He revealed that Jonathan Harris had earlier confessed to him, stating, "There's nothing like squeezing somebody and feeling the last breath leave their body." In August 2019, Judge William R. Carpenter sentenced Jonathan Wesley Harris to life in prison without parole, plus an additional 22 to 45 years. The judge added the extra decades to ensure that Harris would never be freed, sending a message to future governors or pardon boards. In December 2018, Philadelphia police arrested Andre Melton for the robbery of Christina Carling Craft's apartment. In March 2020, the court sentenced him to 1 to 4 years in prison, followed by 3 years of consecutive probation, which means Melton will be under court supervision for a total of 7 years. Before learning his fate, Melton said, "I would like to apologize to the family for any grief or pain that I caused. I am not the bad person the district attorney is trying to make me out to be." Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Marilyn Levesque. In the year 2020, the body of 22-year-old Marilyn Levesque was discovered with multiple stab wounds, sparking a massive public outcry. The community was outraged, demanding that Canadian authorities provide an explanation for how such a heinous crime could have occurred. Marilyn was born in 1997 in Chicoutimi, Quebec, to Karine Levesque and François Goulet, who separated soon after her birth. Those close to her described her as kind, outgoing, and always friendly. Marilyn grew up partly with her mother and partly in foster homes. She left her hometown for Quebec City at the age of 17 and returned after a breakup with her boyfriend. From then on, she commuted between the two cities, working in Quebec City 2 or 3 days a week and taking the bus or carpool services since she didn't have a driver's license. By early 2020, Marilyn was living with her new boyfriend, Gabriel Truchon, in the Chicoutimi district, about 130 miles from Quebec City. Gabriel said Marilyn dreamed of a stable life and wanted to pursue a career in architecture. Tragically, on January 22, 2020, everything changed. Marilyn was in Quebec City for work, while Gabriel stayed in Chicoutimi. At around 9 p.m., Gabriel became worried when he couldn't reach Marilyn after several attempts to contact her. He then texted her co-workers, hoping someone had seen her. Soon, Gabriel received a call from an unknown number. The caller, identifying himself as a police officer, told Gabriel that Marilyn had been found dead. Forensic experts later determined that she died from multiple stab wounds, with more than 50 wounds on her body. To continue with Marilyn's story, let's go back 17 years. In 2003, Chantal Deschênes, a 32-year-old bartender at a Quebec hotel, met Eustachio Gallès, her 36-year-old boss, who oversaw the hotel's guest meals. Soon after, Chantal and Eustachio started a passionate romance. At the time, Chantal was a single mother of 2 girls, aged 10 and 6, whose father she had not lived with for several years. Eustachio, on the other hand, had been married to Joanne Lafront since 1996 and had 3 children with her. Their relationship was tumultuous, marked by instances of physical violence. For instance, Eustachio would occasionally smash walls in their home during fits of anger. On one occasion, while traveling through Ottawa, he assaulted his wife and was arrested, spending 7 days in jail. Despite these incidents and other forms of verbal abuse, Joanne Lafront claimed she wasn't afraid of her husband, describing him as a good father to their children, although his demanding job often kept him from spending time with the family. When Eustachio began his romance with Chantal, he left his wife Joanne and their 3 children to move in with his new love. The whirlwind relationship was soon formalized, and Chantal and Eustachio got married. At first, everything seemed perfect for the couple, as is often the case. Eustachio got along great with Chantal's kids, and they spent their weekends together, going to the movies, skating, and enjoying other activities. However, the relationship began to unravel as quickly as it had started. Meanwhile, Eustachio was working over 60 hours a week as the food and beverage manager at the hotel. He warned his supervisors he would quit on December 31, 2004, due to the unbearable job pressures, but he didn't confide in his employer about his personal struggles. Eustachio Gallès and Chantal Deschênes had a highly complex and often volatile relationship. According to recent accounts from witnesses, Gallès was intensely jealous, while others claimed that both partners were possessive and frequently argued about it. Friends close to the couple revealed that Gallès would sometimes shout, but never physically harmed Chen, who would often retaliate by insulting or even slapping him. The tension in the relationship climaxed on October 21, 2004. That morning, Eustachio and Chantal returned home after a night shift at the hotel. Chantal's 2 daughters were still asleep, having spent the evening with Joanie Hion, their babysitter, who slept over at their house because their mother worked the night shift. From the couple's conversation, Joanie learned of the night's argument between them. The babysitter left the house around 7:15 a.m., and the children were supposed to go to school around 8 a.m. Before leaving for school, the girls went in to greet their mother, who was in the bedroom with Eustachio. It was the last time they saw their mother alive. At 1:29 p.m., Eustachio Gallès went to his ex-wife Joanna Lafront's home to drop off his cash savings. While there, he called the police and confessed to killing his wife, Chantal. 10 minutes later, at 1:39 p.m., the police arrived at Joanna's home, where Gallès repeated his confession and surrendered. Gallès urged the police to hurry to the school before Chantal's 2 daughters returned home and discovered their mother's body. Meanwhile, the police went to Chantal's home, where they found her bloody body on the bed in her bedroom. Next to the body, they found 2 blood-stained knives and a broken hammer. An autopsy revealed that Chantal died from multiple hammer blows and stab wounds. The hammer blows were so brutal that the handle broke. In 2006, a jury found Gallès guilty of second-degree murder during his trial. He admitted that he killed Chantal because she had decided to leave him. Lilie was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole for 15 years. Lilie had a history of violent behavior towards his partners. In 1997, he was jailed for 7 days for assaulting his first wife, Joanne LaFrance. Tragically, he went on to kill his second wife, Chantal Dechaine, in 2004. This pattern of behavior suggests that Lilie had a tendency to abuse women. Despite this disturbing history, the parole board to release him in March 2019, concluding that his risk of reoffending was low. As a condition of his parole, Lilie was permitted to date women to meet his sexual needs, but with strict limitations. His parole officer set rules for his interactions with women, allowing him to visit an erotic massage parlor once a month, but prohibiting romantic relationships. Additionally, he was required to observe a curfew between 10 p.m. and 8 a.m. unless attending an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. However, Lilie struggled to abide by these rules, frequently visiting the massage parlor several times a week instead of just once a month. In March 2019, Lilie was released. Later, in June, the 51-year-old visited an erotic massage parlor where he met 22-year-old Marilyn Levesque, an employee. Although Marilyn's family knew she earned a living by providing intimate services, she rarely discussed it with them, and when she did, it was often in a light-hearted or joking manner. Those close to her described her as sensitive. However, she had become rigid about her job, and her relatives believed part of her wanted to change her life and quit. Yet, it's not easy to revert to minimum wage after becoming accustomed to earning the equivalent of 2 weeks' work in just 2 hours. How did Marilyn end up in prostitution? The circumstances are unclear, but one thing is certain: her childhood was difficult. She was placed in foster homes repeatedly. Marilyn's boyfriend and close friends were aware of her workplace and the nature of her job. According to a friend, Marilyn didn't have conflicting feelings about her profession. She openly discussed it without pride or shame. Since she worked in Quebec, 100 miles from their home, her boyfriend didn't object to her occupation. Lilie, who was largely left to his own devices, began visiting a massage parlor multiple times a week. Although he seemed reformed to the parole board, his fundamental nature remained unchanged. On several occasions, he became violent towards female employees, resulting in him being banned from the establishment. Unbeknownst to the staff, Lilie was a convicted criminal who had served time in prison for murdering his wife. In late summer 2019, when it was discovered that Lilie had assaulted multiple women at a massage parlor, the parole board prohibited him from visiting erotic massage parlors, warning him that he would face imprisonment if he didn't comply. However, by then, Lilie had developed romantic feelings for Marilyn and found a way to bypass the rules. He offered her $1,300 Canadian to meet him in a hotel room, which she accepted. This was their first encounter outside of a massage parlor, and it happened without any issues. Lilie felt deeply sympathetic towards Marilyn, so he started opening up to her about his emotional struggles. He shared with her how much he still missed his late wife, whom he had mourned for 15 years, but he didn't reveal that he was responsible for her death. After this, Lilie began to sense that Marilyn was distancing herself from him, and their connection was deteriorating. He felt rejected, which sparked anxiety and jealousy within him. Lilie scheduled another hotel meeting with Marilyn for January 22, 2020. Marilyn told her boyfriend that she generally avoided hotel meetings, preferring massage parlors instead, as they had guards to protect the workers from potential issues and to escort troublesome clients out. However, the attractive offer of $2,000 convinced Marilyn to agree to another hotel meeting. Around 8:30 p.m., after dinner, the couple went to their hotel room. At 11:35 p.m., Lilie arrived at the police station and, similar to his 2004 case, confessed to murdering Marilyn. The police rushed to the hotel, hoping to find Marilyn still alive. Unfortunately, she had already been killed. The autopsy revealed 57 stab wounds on her body. It was determined that Gillies had spent about 2 hours at a bar before surrendering to the police, during which time he got rid of the murder weapon and Marilene's cell phone. A terrible event occurred, but it was made even more distressing by the perpetrator's identity, past, and the circumstances surrounding his latest atrocity, sparking widespread outrage and demands for answers from the authorities. Bill Blair, the Secretary of Public Safety, expressed his condolences to Marilene's family and stated that her death was preventable. Quebec Justice Minister Sonia Lebel sought an explanation for how a violent criminal like Gillies was granted parole and questioned whether the officers involved had sufficient training to assess public safety risks. She also called on Federal Public Safety Minister Bill Blair to investigate the situation. An investigation commission was established to examine the parole board's actions and found deficiencies in their work, case management, and supervision of the offender. The head of the Correctional Service of Canada described Marilene's death as a terrible tragedy that should never have occurred, promising that the Correctional Service of Canada, in collaboration with the parole board, would take significant steps to prevent similar incidents in the future. Despite the high-profile comments, no one faced serious punishment in the end. Some staff members from the parole board were reassigned to different roles, while others were sent for additional training. Unfortunately, there is no way to bring back the young woman who lost her life. It is hoped that her tragic death will make decision-makers think twice about the serious consequences of their actions. As part of a settlement agreement between the authorities and the victim's family, the government provided compensation for her death, which prevented a lawsuit from being filed by her relatives. The amount of compensation remains undisclosed due to confidentiality agreements. It's worth noting that some people even blamed the victim for her own death because of her profession. Gillies was initially charged with second-degree murder, but the charge was upgraded to first-degree murder after it was revealed that he had planned the crime in advance and purchased the knife beforehand. Gillies admitted his guilt, confessing that he had deliberately planned the murder. During his trial in February 2020, the prosecutor argued that Gillies' motivation for the crime was jealousy, resulting from his realization that Marilene was using him for financial gain. On February 27, 2020, the 51-year-old Eustachio Gillies was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment. This time, he will be eligible to apply for parole, but not until he has served 25 years, unlike the 15-year requirement following the murder of his wife. Do you think Gillies will be released again if he lives to be 76 years old? Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Girish. On November 30, 2003, Shuba, a 27-year-old law student, became engaged to Girish, a software engineer. Her father, a respected lawyer in Bengaluru, had a stellar reputation in the legal community. As his daughter grew older, he worried about her marital prospects. Consequently, he arranged her marriage to Girish, a suitable match with a good job at a prominent multinational company. The two families had known each other for years, which further solidified the union. Confident that Girish would provide a secure future for his daughter, Shuba's father gave his blessing for the engagement, set to take place on November 30, 2003, with a wedding planned for April 2004. However, 3 days after the engagement, on December 3, 2003, Shuba suggested they celebrate with dinner at a restaurant that evening. Girish was thrilled, as this was the first time his fiancée had taken the initiative to plan a night out. Before dinner, Girish took Shuba to his office to introduce her to his colleagues. Afterwards, they headed to a restaurant on Old Airport Road for dinner. After the meal, around 9:30 p.m., Girish and Shuba began their journey home. But on the way, Shuba asked Girish to stop near the airport's landing strip so they could watch the planes take off and land. Girish agreed, parking his scooter to the side, and they stood together, enjoying the plains and each other's company. Suddenly, 3 boys on motorcycles appeared, attacking Girish. Shuba was left alone to face the 3 armed boys, and she desperately shouted for help. Unfortunately, they were alone at that moment, and the 3 boys brutally beat Girish before fleeing. Shuba persisted in shouting for help, and her cries were fortunately heard by a passing car driver who stopped to assist her and Girish. With great effort, both the car owner and Shuba managed to get Girish into their vehicle and drive him to a nearby hospital. The doctor admitted Girish and immediately began his treatment. Meanwhile, Shuba notified both her and Girish's families about the accident, and within a short time, both families arrived at the hospital. Despite the doctor's best efforts throughout the night, they were ultimately unable to save Girish, and on December 4th, they pronounced him deceased. Since this was a clear-cut case of murder, Girish's father rushed to the nearby police station that same day. He recounted to the police how his son and his fiancée had gone out for dinner the previous night, and how, while they were standing at a landing spot near the airport, Girish was attacked, ultimately leading to his death. The police promptly took over the case and began their investigation by questioning Shuba, the sole eyewitness to Girish's murder. Given her distress, she had been inconsolable since learning of Girish's death. The police approached her gently. However, Shuba's account matched the one Girish's father had already provided, prompting the police to launch a thorough probe of both the crime scene and Girish's background. They even explored the possibility that Girish had personal enemies, but their efforts yielded no concrete leads to crack the case. According to reports, the police were unable to find any CCTV footage in the area, which was largely deserted and lacked residential cameras at the time. Consequently, the investigators turned to Girish and Shuba's engagement video as a potential source of leads. Their motive was to investigate whether someone close to Girish might have been involved in his murder, given that only their families were aware of the couple's trip. The investigative officer meticulously examined the engagement video, focusing on the behavior of their families and relatives. However, no suspicious behavior was detected among them. Undeterred, the officer re-watched the video, this time concentrating on Girish and Shuba's neighbors and other guests in attendance. Unfortunately, this effort also yielded no positive results. In the midst of the investigation, the officer took note of Shuba's facial expressions. Unlike what one would expect, she didn't seem happy and was making an effort to keep her distance from Girish. Initially, the officer had focused on the behavior and expressions of Girish and Shuba's relatives, almost neglecting Shuba herself. But after seeing Shuba's unhappy expressions and attempts to distance herself from Girish in a brief clip, he decided to review the entire engagement video again. Upon re-examining the video, the officer observed that during the ring ceremony, Shuba looked visibly sad while sitting with Girish and was consistently trying to create space between them. This struck the investigating officer as unusual, as newly engaged couples are typically ecstatic. Shuba's evident unhappiness raised his suspicions, but he also recognized that relying solely on a video wasn't enough to take action against her. Therefore, he decided to investigate Shuba's call records. Although it was unusual for the police to use this technology in 2003, as it was still relatively new in India at the time, the officer's interest in technology led him to pursue this avenue. In fact, mobile phones were a rarity in India back then, but Shuba's wealthy family had made it possible for her to own one. Upon obtaining her call records, it was revealed that on December 3rd, Shuba had made repeated calls to a single number. The police then traced the number back to a boy named Aaron Verma. The police then delved deeper to uncover who Aaron Verma was and what his connection to Shuba was. They soon discovered that both Aaron and Shuba attended the same college, with Shuba being 2 years his senior. This new information prompted the officer to track their locations on December 3rd. Shuba's location was found near the airport, as she was with Girish. However, When tracing Aaron's location, the police found that he was also near the airport, following Shuba to every location she visited. This heightened the police's suspicion, and they subsequently tracked down Aaron Verma and summoned him to the police station for questioning. When the police questioned Aaron about his whereabouts on December 3rd, he claimed to have been out of town for work. The instant he made this statement, the investigative officer was convinced that Aaron was lying and would never admit the truth if asked directly. So they released him, but secretly tapped his phone beforehand. The officer suspected that Aaron and Shuba might be involved in Girish's death. However, they couldn't present them as guilty in court based solely on their alibis and call records from that day. Therefore, they put Aaron's phone under surveillance, believing that if he was involved in the murder, he would eventually incriminate himself. Upon returning home from the police station, Aaron's first call was to Shuba. Over the phone, Aaron informed Shuba that the police had questioned him about Girish's death. Shuba asked if he had disclosed anything to the police. Aaron reassured her that he had kept quiet and successfully misled the police, telling them he was out of town on December 3rd. When the police heard the recording, their suspicions were fully corroborated, leading to the immediate arrest of Aaron and Shuba. At the station, the police presented them with the call recording, call detail records, and location history. Initially, both attempted to deceive the police, but eventually, Aaron's nerve failed, and he confessed to the police that they had indeed murdered Girish. The unfolding story stunned everyone. The 19-year-old Aaron and 27-year-old Shuba had been secretly involved for the past 2 years. It was astonishing to learn that Aaron, still in his teenage years, was deeply in love with a woman 7 years his senior. Reports suggest that Shuba also desired to marry Aaron, but their dream remained unrealized. Shuba's father discovered their secret relationship and disapproved of Aaron, who was significantly younger than Shuba. As a result, he hastily arranged Shuba's engagement to Girish, which took place on November 30th. However, Shuba was unhappy with this arrangement. Despite Girish being educated and financially stable, Shuba found his simplicity and modest lifestyle unappealing and felt he wasn't a suitable match for her. During the investigation, it emerged that Shuba had confided in her beautician at the time of her engagement, revealing her intention to either flee before the wedding or harm Girish. Coerced into the engagement by her father, Shuba had now devised a plan with Aaron to eliminate Girish. This explained her repeated calls to Aaron, who agreed to carry out her plan. With the help of his cousin Dinesh, Aaron hired a local thug named Vinette. Shuba planned to lure Girish out of the house on December 3rd, pretending to take him out for dinner. On their way back, she would take him to a secluded spot near the airport's landing strip, where it would be easy to carry out the murder. According to this plan, on December 3rd, after dinner, Shuba expressed her desire to watch airplanes take off. He agreed to his fiancée's request, and they proceeded to the landing spot. Throughout their journey, Shuba kept Aaron informed about her location through regular calls and messages. Shortly after, Aaron, Dinesh, and Venkatesa arrived at the flight landing spot. Dinesh and Venkatesa then launched a brutal attack on Girish, striking him on the head with an iron rod. Girish collapsed instantly, bleeding profusely from his head injury and losing consciousness. Once the four were convinced that Girish was on the brink of death, Aaron and his companions fled the scene, abandoning the iron rod in the nearby bushes. After a significant period following Girish's injury, Shuba sought help, and the rest of the story unfolded. Despite this, Girish's killers managed to evade the police for nearly 50 days until Shuba and her accomplices were arrested on January 25, 2004, when the motive behind Girish's murder and the identities of his killers were finally revealed. The news of the incident spread rapidly throughout the state media. The police gathered all the evidence, interviewed witnesses, and prepared their case file, which was then presented in court. Although the case languished in the regular court for a lengthy period, it was eventually transferred to a fast-track court. Even in the fast-track court, the trial continued from 2007 to 2010. In May 2010, the fast-track court sentenced Shuba, Aaron, and their companions to life imprisonment. However, in July 2010, Shuba filed a bail application with the Karnataka High Court, which upheld the lower court's decision and rejected her bail plea. With no other option, Shuba then filed her bail application with the Supreme Court in August 2014, and the Supreme Court granted her bail for a limited period. The investigative officer who cracked this murder case by reviewing a video recording of the incident deserves appreciation. However, if Shuba had mustered the courage to confide in her father that she didn't like Girish and wouldn't be happy with him in her life, perhaps Girish would be alive today. Even if Shuba had shared her concerns with Girish, maybe he could have persuaded her father. The tragic irony of this story is that by the time Girish's killers were sentenced to life imprisonment, Girish's father had already passed away, leaving no one to find closure. With that, the Girish murder case finally comes to a close. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Petit family. The Petit family was revered as a model family, exceeding expectations with their stable economic background and exemplary children. They effortlessly commanded admiration from those around them. William Petit, the patriarch, was a Connecticut native and a standout athlete in high school, particularly in basketball, where he naturally assumed a leadership role. In addition to his athletic prowess, he was also the valedictorian of his class, as evidenced by his law degree from Dartmouth University. However, his true passion lay not in law, but in helping people, caring for the sick, and making the world a better place. So, after graduating, he pursued a career in medicine at the University of Pittsburgh. During his third year of residency at the Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh, William met Jennifer Hawke, an oncology nurse and co-director of the health center's pre-graduate internship program. They soon fell deeply in love, and those who knew them attested that they were perfect for each other. They married in 1985, and 4 years later, they welcomed their first daughter, Haley. The pregnancy spurred them to form a large family, leading them to purchase a house in Cheshire, Connecticut. On November 17, 1995, their second daughter, Michaela, was born. After giving birth, Jennifer resumed her work as a nurse and co-director of the internship. Sadly, she was later diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, a disease that has no cure, which she fought against for the rest of her life. Despite this, her family remained supportive throughout. At just 10 years old, their eldest daughter began raising funds for the National Multiple Sclerosis Society, an endeavor that would yield significant sums over the years. Meanwhile, Michaela excelled academically and planned to take over the fundraising efforts when her sister went to college, enabling her to continue making a positive impact in her community. Having spent the summer learning to cook, she often delighted in preparing meals for her family. Tragically, this ordinary activity led to a fateful encounter with the perpetrator. On a July night in 2007, Michaela was preparing dinner for her family, but required additional ingredients for her recipe. So she and her mother went to the nearest market. Joshua Komisarjevsky, who had recently been released from prison, happened to be at the same location. Komisarjevsky's childhood was marked by trauma and complexity. Born to teenage parents, he was adopted by the Komisarjevsky family, a renowned European artistic dynasty, just a week after birth. His adoptive family was deeply religious and enforced strict discipline, which contributed to his struggles in school despite his high IQ. Eventually, his parents opted to homeschool him. During his trial, Komisarjevsky alleged that he was sexually abused by a cousin during childhood, but his family chose to keep the incident quiet. This traumatic experience likely contributed to the development of his rebellious and chaotic personality. By 14, Joshua Komisarjevsky had faced accusations of abusing his sister, and around this time he committed his first burglary, launching his career as a thief. In 2002, he was arrested for the first time on 18 counts of burglary and theft, earning him a 9-year prison sentence. During the trial, he made a chilling admission, revealing that he derived pleasure from listening to people while they slept and invading their privacy, feeding off their insecurity. Released on parole in 2007 at 27, officials deemed him a threat to society, a calculating criminal with perverted tendencies. But the jury disregarded these warnings, deeming Joshua fit for release. After his release, he moved into a halfway house for ex-convicts, where he encountered his future accomplice, Stephen Hayes. Hayes had a lengthy history of incarceration, starting at the age of 16 in 1980. Throughout the years, he was repeatedly arrested for violent robbery and burglary, earning him multiple sentences. In 2004, he received a prison sentence, only to be granted parole in 2006, which ultimately led him to the same residence where he crossed paths with Komisarjevsky. On the night of July 22, 2007, Michaela Petit was busily preparing dinner for her family, only to realize she needed additional ingredients to complete her recipe. She asked her mother to drive her to the nearest market to pick up the necessary items. What they didn't know was that they were being closely watched by Komisarji, who took meticulous note of every detail, from the make and model of their vehicle to their facial features and Michaela's distinctive blonde hair. After finishing their shopping, the Petit family returned home, oblivious to the fact that they were being tailed. The family had a peaceful dinner, unaware it would be their last together. Later, while the others slept, William Petit dozed off in the living room. Suddenly, strange noises shattered the peace. William was attacked, beaten with a baseball bat, and left tied up in the basement. The intruders proceeded upstairs to locate Haley's room, where they found her asleep. Haley and her sister Michaela were bound to their bedposts by their hands and feet, their heads shrouded by pillowcases. In the master bedroom, Jennifer Petit slumbered peacefully. The intruders crept in and roused her effortlessly, swiftly restraining her hands and feet. With the family members under their control, the intruders took their time to survey the premises, even pausing to smoke cigarettes in the living room. After ransacking the home for jewelry, cash, and other valuables, they finally prepared to depart. As the Petits heard the burglars making their exit, they must have thought the ordeal was finally over. But, unbeknownst to them, their torment was only just beginning. After selling stolen items at a pawn shop, the ex-convicts were disappointed to find they hadn't gotten as much money as they had expected. Motivated by greed, they decided to return to the house. There, they found a check register with $40,000 and planned to steal $155,000. Before going back, they filled a couple of gasoline cans, which was captured on surveillance camera footage. Back at the house, they presented their plan to Jennifer, threatening to kill her entire family if she didn't cooperate. Desperate to protect her daughter, Jennifer agreed to accompany Stephen to the bank the next morning. Meanwhile, Joshua took advantage of Jennifer's absence by entering Michaela's room, where he untied her and began to undress her. He took photos with his cell phone and sexually assaulted her, recording the act. Afterwards, he took her to the bathroom to clean her and ensure no DNA evidence was left behind. Then, he ordered her to put her pajamas back on and tied her up again. The autopsy of Michaela later revealed evidence that Komisarji had raped her. During the examination, State Medical Examiner Dr. Wayne Carver found Arvi's DNA in her body. At the bank, everything appeared normal, but Stephen was unaware of Jennifer's actions in the queue before she approached the teller. While waiting in line, Jennifer wrote a discreet note on a flyer asking for assistance. The note read, "My name is Jennifer Hawk Petit. I have $115,000 in my savings account, and I need to withdraw it. I'm in a desperate situation. My family is being held hostage and will be killed if I don't comply. Please, someone, call the police." Despite Jennifer not having any identification, the teller decided to give her the money. As soon as Jennifer received the cash, she left the bank and returned to the car where her captor was waiting. Meanwhile, the bank employee promptly called the police to report the incident. The manager informed the 911 dispatcher that Hawk Petite claimed the home invaders were being courteous, and that she believed their sole intention was to steal money. In response to the bank's alert, the Chester police carefully assessed the situation, establishing a discreet vehicle perimeter without alerting the intruders. With the situation now under surveillance, the police observed from a safe distance, opting not to intervene just yet. Joshua boasted to his accomplice about attacking Michaela, implying he'd do the same to Jennifer. Stephen restrained and undressed Jennifer while William, hearing her cries, yelled up and was told to calm down. Regaining consciousness, William freed himself, crawled to the stairs and escaped to the backyard, fearing they'd kill them all. Joshua went to check on William, only to discover that he had escaped. In her later confession, Hayes revealed that while she and Stephen were raping Hawk Pettit on the living room floor, Komisarski burst in and announced that William had fled. Upon hearing this, Stephen strangled Jennifer to death, continuing to assault her even in her final moments. Shortly after, they heard William's cries for help. A neighbor, initially unaware of the traumatized boy's identity due to his severe injuries, called 911, realizing the police would soon arrive. To eliminate all evidence, the intruders doused Jennifer's lifeless body and parts of the house, including the daughter's bedrooms and their own clothing, with gasoline. Investigators later found traces of the accelerant on the Petite sisters' beds and the clothes they wore. Hayes and Komisarski set the house ablaze and fled, unaware that the authorities had set up a perimeter a few miles ahead. Within 5 minutes, they collided with a police vehicle, and after being surrounded, the two perpetrators were pulled from their car and arrested. They were immediately identified as ex-convicts. Meanwhile, the fire raging through the house was growing in intensity. An ambulance arrived, and Dr. William Pettit, the gravely injured father, was rushed to the nearest hospital. Soon after, firefighters battled the blaze, and upon extinguishing it, they stumbled upon a horrific scene amidst the remnants of the house. The first body discovered was Jennifer's, her remains charred with remnants of rope bound to her ankles. Upon reaching the second floor, they found Michaela still tied to her bed, having succumbed to the devastating flames. In a surprising twist, Haley had managed to break free from her restraints and attempted to escape, but sadly collapsed just a few meters away, overcome by the toxic smoke. William managed to free himself from his restraints, escape the house, and crawl to a neighbor's yard to seek help. The neighbor failed to recognize him at first, due to the severity of his injuries. Both Hayes and Komorowski confessed to the murders. During her interrogation, detectives noted that Hayes smelled of gasoline throughout. Each assailant accused the other of being the driving force and mastermind behind the home invasion. Komorowski's diary, later entered into evidence, revealed that he blamed William for the murders, calling him a coward and claiming that he could have saved his family if he had wanted to. The trial of Stephen Hayes began on September 13, 2010, with a jury comprising 7 women and 5 men. The defense argued that Joshua Komorowski was the mastermind behind the crime, responsible for escalating its violent nature, while prosecutors argued that both Hayes and Komorowski shared responsibility. After approximately 5 hours of deliberation on October 5th, the jury found Hayes guilty. The sentencing phase began on October 18th, with the jury initially divided over recommending life imprisonment or death. Hayes' defense argued that life imprisonment without parole would be a harsher punishment. On November 8th, the jury recommended the death sentence for Hayes on each of the 6 capital felony counts. Earlier, Hayes had attempted to negotiate a plea bargain for a life sentence, but prosecutors sought the death penalty. Dr. William Pettit, the sole survivor, remarked on the verdict, while the Connecticut State Judicial Branch took the unprecedented step of offering post-traumatic stress assistance to jurors, acknowledging the trial's profoundly disturbing nature. This historic measure was necessitated by the jurors' 2-month exposure to graphic images and gruesome testimony during the triple murder trial, marking the first time the state judicial branch had provided such support. On December 2, 2010, Hayes expressed remorse for the suffering he had inflicted on the Pettit family, stating that his own death would be a welcome relief and hoping it would bring peace and comfort to those he had hurt. Judge John Blue handed down 6 death sentences and an additional 106 years for other crimes. However, in August 2015, Hayes's death sentence was commuted to life imprisonment when Connecticut abolished capital punishment. The trial of Joshua Komisarjevsky began on September 19, 2011. His lawyers offered a guilty plea in exchange for a life sentence, but prosecutors sought the death penalty, arguing that Komisarjevsky was under Hayes' influence. Komisarjevsky was found guilty on October 13, 2011, and the jury recommended the death penalty on December 9, 2011. During sentencing, Komisarjevsky expressed shame and remorse for the harm caused, claiming he had not intended to kill anyone. Judge Blue set July 20, 2012 as Komisarjevsky's execution date, underscoring his responsibility for the crime. However, like Hayes, Komisarjevsky's death sentence was converted to life imprisonment in August 2015, following Connecticut's abolition of the death penalty. The trials and sentencing of Hayes and Komisarjevsky represent a dark and pivotal chapter in Connecticut's legal history. The heinous nature of the crimes and the emotional toll on all involved, including the jurors, exposed the complexities and challenges of the legal system in dealing with such atrocious acts. Dr. Petit's statements during the trials poignantly highlighted the lasting impact of the crime on surviving family members and the community, which continues to pay tribute to the memory of the victims. The sole survivor, Dr. William Petit, was released from the hospital just 4 days after admission to attend his family's funeral. Tormented by guilt and the anguish of having survived, he later founded a foundation to aid children and young victims of violence, raising hundreds of thousands of dollars. He later pursued a career in politics, becoming a state representative as a member of the Republican Party. The brutal murders of the Petit family have had a profound and lasting impact on the community, which comes together every year to honor their memory. Lingering questions persist among family members and the public regarding whether the authorities responded adequately to the crisis, particularly with respect to the time spent observing the situation from a safe distance, which may have been critical in preventing the devastating outcome. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Timothy Jones Jr. Timothy Jones Jr. and Amber Kaiser, a divorced couple, had 5 children together, all under the age of 9: Mara Grace, Elias, Xavier, Nathalie, Gabrielle Asher, and Elaine Marie. The family lived in Lexington, South Carolina. When they first met as teenagers, Amber was attracted to Timothy's world and felt a strong connection to him and his way of life. They got married young, and while Timothy pursued his education in Mississippi, Amber dedicated herself to being a homemaker. Timothy grew up with a mother who struggled with schizophrenia, which gradually worsened over time. She eventually needed constant care. When Timothy's father was just 20 years old, he took Timothy to live with his grandmother. There, Timothy was exposed to a troubled environment marked by domestic violence, substance abuse, and alcoholism. Despite a tough upbringing, Timothy displayed a natural aptitude for numbers, effortlessly solving math problems, and disassembling and reassembling computers with ease. However, his life took a dramatic turn when he entered adolescence and began experiencing auditory hallucinations. At the age of 10, Timothy started using drugs and drinking excessively, and at 15, he suffered a traumatic brain injury in a car accident. This injury affected his frontal lobe, the area of the brain responsible for regulating impulses, which is also linked to psychopathic tendencies. Following the accident, Timothy's behavior became increasingly erratic and stubborn. He grew intensely jealous of his father, feeling threatened by anyone who had a relationship with him, believing they were taking away his father's attention. Over time, Timothy became convinced that his father didn't love him and harbored a deep-seated fear of abandonment. After completing high school, Timothy aspired to join the elite U.S. Navy SEALs, but he lacked the required athletic talent and discipline, leading to his eventual expulsion from the training program due to substance abuse. In 2001, Timothy Jones Jr. was sentenced to a year in a labor camp at an Illinois state prison. When he was released, he appeared to have undergone a significant transformation, with religion becoming a central guiding force in his life. At an amusement park in Chicago, he met Amber, the woman who would become the mother of his children, and they quickly decided to get married, in accordance with the rigid expectations of Timothy's Pentecostal church. At the time of their marriage, Amber was 19 years old, and Timothy was 22. Soon after, Amber became aware of the church's strict rules, which prohibited women from cutting their hair, wearing pants, makeup, or jewelry. Timothy believed in the principle that women should submit to their husbands and have many children. Timothy was a devout individual who dedicated his life to the church. Despite many people warning him against taking the Bible too literally, he remained committed to his faith. He and his spouse had 3 children in quick succession: Mara, Elias, and Nathan, each born a year apart. As their family grew, they relocated to Mississippi, where Timothy earned a degree in computer science and engineering from the state university with highest honors. Throughout this period, Timothy Jones Jr. successfully balanced his marital life, parenthood, and various jobs. His family was incredibly proud of him, recognizing Timothy as a remarkable genius with a bright future. Timothy's life seemed to be progressing smoothly. He secured a job at Intel as a computer chip manufacturer, which his wife Amber saw as a means to a better life. Having lived in student housing in Mississippi, they aspired to raise their 3 children in a larger house and even considered hiring a nanny. Timothy's dream of living on a farm led him to buy a rundown trailer on a dirt road in Red Bank. He purchased animals to raise, and Amber stayed at home to care for the kids and the animals. The problem was that Amber was isolated, with no car and no driving skills in this rural area. By 2012, they had 2 more children, and problems started to surface. Timothy questioned whether he was the father of their youngest daughter, Elaine. He also wanted Amber to homeschool the kids. Despite her limited education, she only finished high school. Amber, who already felt lonely with no nearby family and her husband's family living far away in Mississippi, felt even more inferior to her intelligent and educated husband. Tensions rose when Timothy accused Amber of having an affair with their neighbor. Their marriage began to fall apart, and they considered getting a divorce. Timothy wanted sole custody of the children, so he visited a therapist and asked for a statement to give to his divorce lawyer, claiming he was capable of raising the children on his own. Amber, who didn't have a lawyer and was unsure of what to do, eventually decided it would be best for the children to stay with their father, as she was unemployed and lacked education. As the primary breadwinner, Timothy was granted full custody, and Amber was allowed to visit the children regularly. She left her husband and children behind. However, Timothy's mental state began to deteriorate. Haunted by his failed marriage, he started using drugs and drinking again, struggling with the voices in his head. He became easily provoked over minor issues, and Amber reported that he had once beaten her in front of their children until she lost consciousness. As Timothy struggled to balance work and taking care of the children, he hired a nanny service despite his own instability. The first 2 nannies observed that his home was spotless, and he was dedicated and attentive to his children. Later, he switched services and hired 17-year-old Crystal, who had a young daughter of her own. Timothy soon began an affair with the nanny and attempted to convert her to his religion, insisting she adopt the church's customs, such as wearing long dresses, growing her hair out, and submitting to his authority. When Crystal refused, their relationship began to fall apart. Crystal later stated that Timothy was extremely harsh towards his children, making them stand on their toes for hours, because he believed punishment was necessary to purify their sick bodies. She left after catching him trying to hit her young daughter. After Crystal's departure, Timothy hired another nanny who noticed a significant change in him. His previously clean home was now filthy, filled with trash, dirty clothes, and infested with cockroaches. Over time, Timothy Jones Jr. became increasingly violent, punishing his children daily. He started feeding them only oatmeal throughout the day, limiting them to one meal. In August 2014, the nanny contacted South Carolina's social services to report the neglect and abuse in Timothy's home. She described the lack of food and the physical abuse the children suffered. The abuse was so severe that the teachers at the elementary school attended by the older children had previously reported it to the agency months earlier. The agency had required Jones to sign a written promise never to mistreat or hit his children again, as they often arrived at school with bruises. On the afternoon of Thursday, August 28, 2014, Timothy picked up his 3 older children from elementary school and his 2 younger ones from the nanny around 7 p.m. Timothy became enraged about some broken outlets in their mobile home. He questioned his 6-year-old son Nathan about the damage, and when Nathan denied any involvement, Timothy forced Nathan to do push-ups, squats, and other exercises repeatedly, while whipping him with a belt whenever he slowed down. Amber, Timothy's ex-wife, called to talk to her kids. During the call, Nathan told his mom about the punishment he got for breaking some outlets, saying it was an accident. Timothy got angry, ended the call, and told Amber to stop protecting Nathan. After hours of being punished, Nathan was extremely tired, dehydrated, and begging for it to stop. He passed out, and Timothy carried him to bed, leaving him alone without water or any help. Phone records show that Amber tried to call back 8 more times, but Timothy didn't answer. Around 1 a.m., Timothy searched for a specific scene from the movie American History on YouTube, even though he knew Nathan was already unconscious. At around 1 a.m., Timothy took his 8-year-old daughter Mia to a local store to buy 10 packs of cigarettes. When they got back home, Timothy grabbed Mia and started choking her. Then he went to his 7-year-old son Elias and did the same thing. After that, he took off his belt and went to his 2-year-old son Gabriel and 1-year-old daughter Elaine, putting the belt around their necks and pulling until they stopped breathing. Seeing that the kids weren't moving, Timothy took their sheets and blankets, wrapped each of them separately, and put them in the back seat of his car. On Friday, August 29th, Jones's father called him at 7:43 a.m., but got no response. Later, at 9:36 a.m., the nanny tried calling Jones and finally got through to him on her second attempt. She asked if he would be taking the younger kids to daycare, and he told her not to worry, saying he would take them the following week, explaining that they were currently out of town and would return by Tuesday. Between noon and 2 p.m. that day, Jones drove around, searching online for out-of-state drugs. At 1:27 p.m., he was near Alabama, but he ignored his grandmother's multiple calls, totaling 23 attempts between 3 and 5 p.m. During this time, Jones also searched online for tobacco shops in Alabama and Mississippi, as well as campsites in South Carolina. His location was recorded in Georgia at 8:04 p.m. The next day, August 30th, his grandmother continued sending messages, asking why he wasn't responding to her calls. Then, on August 31st, his phone's location was recorded in Red Bank, New Jersey, at 10:08 a.m. Jones spent the day searching the internet for camping stores, RV parks, and landfills in South Carolina, as well as animal services. He also looked up 2 songs at 4:54 p.m. Timothy Jones Jr. received a reminder from the nanny to bring diapers when he dropped off Gabriel. An hour later, he responded, informing her that he had left South Carolina with the children to start anew, and asking her to clean the mobile home, giving her permission to take whatever she wanted from the belongings he left behind. On September 1st, Timothy was driving from one place to another. The next morning, at 10:35, he searched online for information on disposing of bodies in landfills, making muriatic acid, and camping near countries with no extradition laws, as he was facing legal issues and considering his escape options. Throughout the day, he received updates from the nanny, who had cleaned the mobile home. His boss at Intel also messaged him, inquiring about his work attendance, around 6 p.m. On the morning of September 3rd, a co-worker called him twice, but Timothy did not respond. Later, surveillance video captured Timothy at a well-known store, purchasing a saw, muriatic acid, garbage bags, a 5-gallon bucket, and goggles at 3:37 a.m. He also searched online for information about his missing children. On September 4th at 6:33 a.m., Timothy Jones Jr.'s location was tracked to Charleston, South Carolina, where he deposited a check for $3,508 at a bank. The next day, on September 5th, his phone was briefly turned on in Louisville, Georgia, but his exact location was not recorded. On the morning of September 6th, Jones placed the decomposing bodies of his children in black plastic garbage bags and abandoned them in a clearing along a rural forest road in Alabama, which was recorded at 9:14 a.m. The bodies had been in the back seat of his vehicle since August 29th. Later that day, at around 7 p.m., Jones was stopped at a traffic checkpoint in Smith County, Mississippi. A police officer approached his vehicle and noticed a strong, unpleasant smell coming from inside, as well as apparent bleach stains on the carpet that suggested a recent cleaning attempt. When questioned about the whereabouts of his children, Jones initially denied having any children, then claimed he had 3 children who were in South Carolina. The officers asked for the phone numbers of his father, grandmother, and ex-wife to verify the children's safety, and after making the calls, they promptly arrested Jones. Jones felt overwhelmed with sorrow and anger when he caught one of his sons playing with an electrical outlet. In a fit of rage, he grabbed the boy by the neck and choked him until he lost consciousness. Later, he used a belt to discipline his other son, as his hands were too large to fit around the boy's neck. When his eldest daughter walked into the room and saw what was happening, Jones grabbed her and choked her with his hands until her face turned purple. After the incident, Jones put his son Nathan to bed, only to discover him dead when he checked on him later. During the investigation, Jones explained that he killed his children because he heard voices in his head, leading him to believe they were plotting against him. He also thought that they would be better off in heaven. During his attempted escape, Jones drove through the southeast with the bodies of his 5 children hidden under blankets in his car. He eventually dumped their bodies in a remote Alabama forest before being arrested by chance during a routine traffic stop in Mississippi. Timothy claimed it was an accident and said the punishment he imposed on Nathan went too far, leading to the boy's death from exhaustion caused by the strenuous exercises. When he found Nathan lifeless in his room, Timothy was overcome with panic and decided to kill all his children. The pathologist found it difficult to determine the exact cause of Nathan's death, but suggested that the excessive exercise had weakened him so much that it would have taken minimal force to end his life. The investigators were puzzled as to why Timothy didn't call for emergency services if he genuinely believed it was an accident. Instead, he attempted to hide and dispose of the children's bodies on the same day. Timothy eventually agreed to take the investigators to the location where he had hidden the bodies. On September 11th, authorities recovered the remains of Timothy Jones's 5 children. The evidence collected from his car was handed over to South Carolina authorities and included personal items such as family photos, children's clothing, drawings by the children, letters written by their mother to the children, Timothy Jones's university diploma, and his passport. Additionally, handwritten notes by Jones were found, detailing to-do lists that included instructions on how to dispose of bodies, including grinding bones into powder or small pieces, and burning them. The lists also mentioned supplies needed, such as camping gear gasoline, and muriatic acid. Upon his arrest on September 13, 2014, Jones was placed in a special isolation cell, away from the general prison population. Since then, he has undergone evaluation by various mental health professionals, including psychiatrists, clinical psychologists, and forensic experts. Although the experts' opinions differ, some have diagnosed Jones with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, schizoaffective disorder, or personality disorder. These experts suggest that Jones's mental state at the time of the crime might have been exacerbated by his drug use and a traumatic brain injury he suffered at the age of 15, which could have contributed to an underlying psychotic condition. In late May 2019, Timothy Jones Jr. was tried for a crime considered one of the worst murders in South Carolina's history. The trial featured weeks of intense testimonies and evidence presented against him. After only 2 hours of deliberation, the jury delivered a verdict on June 13, 2019, sentencing Jones Jr. to death. Currently, he is being held in solitary confinement at a correctional institution, where he wears a green jumpsuit that distinguishes him as a death row inmate. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Rossana Galliano. Rossana Galliano was born in Buenos Aires, Argentina, in the late 1970s. She was the youngest child, with 2 older brothers, Oscar and Gustavo, and a sister, Monica. Her parents were Raldo and Graciela. While details of her childhood and teenage years are scarce, it's known that she finished high school in the late 1990s. During this time, her father, Raldo, worked as a mechanic. In early 2001, Jose Arce visited Raldo's workshop, where he met Rossana. Born on November 22, 1948, Jose had spent over 30 years living abroad, including time in Greece and the United States, where he was imprisoned for 4 years for drug trafficking. He returned to Argentina in 1996, owning 8 properties in a posh area of Buenos Aires. Jose and Rossana started dating quickly after meeting at her father's shop, where he brought his vintage car for repairs. Despite their significant age difference, Jose appeared financially stable, thanks to his mother Elsa, who still lived in the United States. When 52-year-old Jose proposed to 22-year-old Rossana, her mother Graciela expressed concerns about their age difference. Jose argued that age was not an obstacle to love, and Graciela turned to Rossana for reassurance. Rossana confirmed her desire to marry him in a whisper. The couple got married on November 17, 2001, just 7 months after meeting. Jose attributed his cheerful, modern, and smart personality to winning Rossana over. They soon had a son named Gono, but problems began to emerge soon after. Jose was a controlling and jealous partner who frequently belittled Rossana and her family. The emotional abuse escalated into physical violence, leaving Rossana feeling trapped and terrified. Jose's intimidating presence, reinforced by his possession of 2 guns, allowed him to maintain control, a situation that Rossana's family was painfully aware of. He would often flaunt his guns when they had visitors, or when he visited others. On one occasion, Rossana's brother Oscar witnessed Jose physically assaulting her while they were painting their house, telling her to shut up before hitting her. Another time, Rossana's father noticed bruises on her back, and she revealed that Jose had dragged her across the pavement. Despite these challenges, Rossana and Jose had their second child, and Rossana tried to make the relationship work, hoping to provide a stable home for their children. However, her efforts were consistently thwarted by Jose's temper and disrespectful behavior. Moreover, Jose's mother Elsa exerted control over their household from a distance, making decisions about their lives during her brief visits to Argentina. By 2006, Rossana had reached her breaking point after enduring years of unbearable abuse, and she finally found the courage to report Jose for domestic violence. Her family, however, remained largely oblivious to the full extent of her suffering. Months later, Rossana filed a second complaint, which included a request for a medical examination to document her injuries. It was then that she confided in her sister Monica, and the two made a pact to stay in close contact. reaching out to each other whenever something happened. Monica became Rosanna's safe haven and primary source of support, providing a refuge from the unbearable realities of life with Jose. Rosanna would often visit Monica's apartment with her children, though Jose would dictate when they had to return, frequently backing up his demands with death threats. Rosanna made the difficult decision to move in with Monica and the children, leaving Jose to stay in his own home. After a period of time, Rosanna took further action by filing another complaint and seeking a divorce, which resulted in a restraining order being issued against Jose. From then on, the only times they met were during child visitation sessions at a neutral location in El Romanzo Exal de la Cruz, as arranged by the court. Rosanna confided in her neighbor, Daniel Gonzalez, a married father of one who worked as a gardener. Rumors began to circulate about a possible romantic relationship between Rosanna and Daniel, although this was never confirmed. Meanwhile, Jose's threats persisted, and Rosanna shared a chilling voicemail with her brother Oscar, in which Jose casually spoke about killing her in mid-2007 while socializing with friends at a bar. Rosanna met Oscar Lugo, a 32-year-old man from Marino who worked in a sewing workshop. They quickly became close, exchanging phone numbers and starting a romantic relationship. Oscar was an old-fashioned gentleman who treated Rosanna with kindness, attention, and listened to her, which was a welcome change after all the turmoil she had faced. By December 2007, Oscar had become a part of Rosanna's holiday celebrations, even dressing up as Santa Claus to delight her two sons. However, their happiness was threatened by Jose, who was keeping a close eye on Rosanna's every move and was aware of her new relationship. The looming divorce had panicked him. Jose tried to persuade Rosanna to end things with Oscar by offering her a truck, but she refused. When Rosanna had a severe nervous breakdown, it was Oscar who accompanied her to the hospital, not Jose. Running out of options, Jose, with the help of his mother Elsa, concocted a plan to hire a hitman whose identity remains unknown. On January 16, 2008, Rosanna and her sister Monica went to El Rano to pick up her sons, aged 4 and 3. However, Jose delayed the handover, making excuses. At 9:15 p.m., Jose called Rosanna, claiming that Geronimo had a fever and that he would take him to the hospital and return him the next day. But Rosanna insisted on taking care of Geronimo herself and asked for the children to be returned. The call was brief, and Rosanna then went back inside. Around 10 p.m., Rosanna sent Oscar Lugo a casual text about their plans for the next day. Later, at 10:50 p.m., Rosanna and Monica sat down for dinner when Jose called again, unleashing a deadly trap. Rosanna stepped out into the garden to improve the reception, but a shadowy figure emerged from behind the trees and shot her 4 times with a .45 caliber gun. Monica, hearing the shots, screamed as Rosanna staggered and fell. Panicked, Monica tried calling 911, but the call wouldn't go through. She then asked her boyfriend to alert the police. Meanwhile, Oscar Lugo, oblivious to the events, attempted to contact Rosanna at 11 p.m., but got no response. He then tried to reach Monica, but she didn't answer. The police investigation revealed that the shooter had entered from an adjacent vacant lot. A witness reported seeing someone fleeing through a gap in the fence, but couldn't provide a clear description due to the darkness. Jose was left stunned after being questioned and subsequently requested a lawyer to take over the proceedings before departing the following day. Meanwhile, a red sweater was discovered during further searches, which Rosanna's relatives identified as belonging to Jose, solidifying his position as the prime suspect in their minds. The case garnered widespread media attention, sending shockwaves throughout the country and sparking a scandal as Jose and his mother publicly proclaimed his innocence, while also making disparaging remarks about Rosanna and suggesting that her multiple lovers should be investigated instead. After the incident, Daniel the gardener became reclusive, shunning all human contact. On the night of Rosanna's funeral, Raldo observed Jose lurking in the distance, watching from his truck without offering condolences or joining the mourners. Jose's defense strategy later focused on discrediting Monica, Rosanna's sister, and the sole witness by raising questions about her behavior, such as why her clothes bore no bloodstains and why she had prioritized calling for help over assisting her sister. However, this theory lacked credibility, and the investigators countered that the murder weapon was too heavy for a woman to wield. The detectives also highlighted a crucial point. Anyone familiar with the house would know that Rosanna had to venture outside to get a cell signal, suggesting a high degree of premeditation in the crime. During the investigation, Rosanna's sons were cared for by their father and grandmother Elsa, while their grandmother Graciela was granted limited access. In contrast, Monica and Oscar were denied access, with Jose citing safety concerns for his sons, despite the legal restrictions. The children longed to see their Aunt Monica, prompting Jose to occasionally allow supervised visits. Monica seized these opportunities to take the children to see a psychologist. Eventually, Graciela successfully obtained visitation rights, although she was denied guardianship. In a contemporaneous interview, Jose claimed that Rosanna had 4 lovers, all of whom had criminal records. According to Jose, Rosanna engaged in intimate relationships with these men to uncover their secrets, which she then leveraged to blackmail them for personal gain. Meanwhile, following threats, Oscar was placed under police protection as a protected witness in his sister's case, requiring him to wear a tracking bracelet. As 2007 drew to a close, investigators still lacked concrete evidence to bring charges against any of the suspects. However, a significant breakthrough came a year after the murder, when Jose was arrested in January 2008, charged with aggravated homicide due to their romantic relationship, premeditation, and the alleged involvement of multiple perpetrators. 4 years after the attack, Oscar exercised his visitation rights to take his nephews to play soccer, sharing a heartwarming hug with the 6- and 7-year-old boys. In April 2013, the trial commenced. Jose maintained his innocence during the May proceedings, but the trial was delayed when he suffered a stroke, ultimately pushing the final verdict to November 2013. The judges concluded that the murder was meticulously planned, bearing the hallmarks of organized crime. Jose and Elsa were found to have chosen the time and place for the attack, aware that a phone call would lure Rosanna outside, rendering her vulnerable. The court determined that financial motives drove the murder, as Jose sought to avoid splitting the marital assets. Jose and Elsa received life imprisonment sentences. The higher court upheld the conviction, citing Jose's threats, the domestic violence endured by Rosanna, and the dominant influence of his mother. The actual perpetrators of the shooting were never identified. In 2015, Jose and Elsa were placed under house arrest, with Jose's health and Elsa's age cited as reasons, allowing the children to reunite with them. The media continued to follow the children's story for years, during which Monica and Graciela had no contact with them. The boys were shuffled between homes familiar to their father, but unknown to Rosanna's family. In January 2017, the court granted the children a weekend visit with their maternal grandparents for the first time. The Galliano family prepared their home with fresh paint, a thorough cleaning, and decorations, and Graciela cooked their favorite dish. That weekend, the Galliano home was filled with joy as the boys played soccer, video games, and even asked to sleep in their grandmother's bed, whom they hadn't seen in over 2 years. On November 24, 2018, Jose passed away after another stroke. The event was another devastating blow for the children, who attended their father's funeral. During the funeral, they expressed their concerns about their future to their Aunt Monica, who reassured them with calmness and love, promising to support whatever they decided. They chose to live with Monica, who then had to confront Elsa to communicate the boys' decision. Through these and many other instances, it was clear that Monica always prioritized her nephew's wishes, whether they wanted to talk or preferred silence. Monica's primary goal was to provide stability and comfort for the boys. In March 2019, Jono decided against switching schools, opting to stay close to his friends and see out his final 2 years. He returned to live with his grandmother, Elsa. Meanwhile, Monica pursued custody of Nahuen. Things appeared to be settling, but tragedy struck in late November 2019 when 87-year-old Elsa was hospitalized and shortly after passed away on November 30th. The following month, Monica was awarded custody of Nahuen. By the end of the year, Jono had moved in with a family friend of his grandmother's. Both brothers still required psychological support to cope with their traumatic experiences, with Jono grappling with depression. Their psychologist acknowledged the staggering sequence of events they had endured. In March 2020, Jono's housemate passed away, prompting him to take refuge with his aunt Monica until October of that year. When he turned 18, Geronimo rented a small apartment and began living independently, supported by the income generated from his inherited properties. Meanwhile, Monica initiated legal proceedings to secure their inheritance, fearing they might be stripped of their assets. Nahuen, on the other hand, demonstrated emotional stability thanks to the support he received, and was encouraged to continue attending therapy as needed.